Way out in a far-off castle, someone just pulled off a summoning from another world, and now the whole room is filled with clouds of hissing steam. Suddenly, a whole crowd of people just spawns in the middle of the room, and they have absolutely no idea where they are or how they even got there. One girl in a school uniform is totally freaking out, saying she was literally just walking to school a minute ago before waking up in this weird place. This kingdom has been getting wrecked by demons for years, and now they're officially on the verge of a total collapse. So they summoned people from another world with insane powers to help them fight. And this 18th generation of legendary heroes did an awesome job answering the king's call. A bunch of random people are standing around totally lost, and all they can think about is why they're suddenly being called heroes. Everyone in the kingdom is hyped to show off their skills. Right in the middle of the crowd, there's a girl with a power that's incredibly rare. It's the divine sight. The girl was totally caught off guard when the magician pointed her out, making everyone turn and stare. As they check the rest of the group, they actually find another super rare skill. These are the king yells that skills aren't for regular people because they're actually gifts from the gods for people summoned from another world to serve them, and these guys are called heroes. Everyone's totally lost but super hyped as these heroes with insane powers get dragged into a whole new world. Momoko tries to say it's not true, but a villager cuts her off to reveal she actually has the divine scythe skill, which can delete high-level demons with just one swing. The king is super hyped because the rest of the group has some crazy skills too, and just as he's realizing this new batch is the real deal, one of his guards calls out to him. The robed guy bows to his lord and introduces the summoned kid, Norio Itonami, but then he tells everyone that this supposed hero has absolutely zero powers, and when they check the king spots Itonami and stays dead silent, while the guy just waits in a super weird pose to see how his lord will react. The city is buzzing just like any other day. Tons of people are rushing around, heading straight for the subway entrance. Massive office buildings and skyscrapers are packed into every corner. They're lined up. Norio lets out a massive sigh, dreading another soul-crushing day as a corporate slave. The subway is totally packed, making everything even worse. As he squeezes onto the train is totally packed, so he gets annoyed and shoves his way in to avoid waiting, only to smash his nose right into a super chubby dude. He looks around totally lost, but then this random guy shows up and introduces himself as God. All the poor guy could think about was his own death. But then God tells him he's actually being summoned to another world. It turns out his dad is Zeus, the king of... Athena's technically the boss, but the other gods got salty because she hates guys, so now this chubby dude has to look after all the clueless items. Norio asks again who's in charge of the summoning, but the kid is totally clueless about what's happening. A god named Festus introduces himself as an expert in these things and steps in. Hephaestus went all out since this was his first time gifting a skill. But Autonomy was so nervous he said he might not even be able to accept it if it was too amazing. Hephaestus holds out a glowing sphere containing his new skill, Master of Excellence, but Norio looks totally unimpressed by the divine gift. The guy warns him the skill is super hard to pull off but swears he can handle it, which only makes Itans freak out even more. Hephaestus presses the sphere against the guy's chest, telling him he put his whole heart into this epic skill, and the kid vows to go all out with it in his new world. He remembered his talk with God right before he got sent to this new world, where everyone was totally freaking out because he had zero skills, something that had literally never happened before. Itonami turns back to the king, thinking that humans are just too weak to ever survive a fight with demons. Norio tries to ask a question, but the king screams for everyone to shut up and yells that nobody is ever going home. The boy didn't even want to bring it up, but Momoko totally panics and repeats that they're stuck, and then Milord admits that while they can summon heroes, they have absolutely no clue how to send them back home. The Demon King is the only one who knows how to get everyone back home. So the heroes have to charge straight to the front lines and crush his army. Utanami says he can't help. Nwari spoke up and made a wild suggestion. He asked the king for a piece of land to call his own. He's tired of being a nobody and wants to finally turn his life around. He doesn't care how far he has to travel as long as he gets that land to live in peace. And since there's no turning back, he's officially ditching his... He's super hyped to kick off his new life, but the king's guards are totally shocked that this hero is acting so bold when he doesn't even have a single skill. Itonami and his guide look out over the massive desert, and from this moment on, every single inch of this wasteland is under his command. The guy says the prince bought this place for Noweri and even paid him a salary, so now he can live here however he wants. Getting knighted with uncharted land means it's actually outside the kingdom. But Itami is totally clueless that kings usually just buy land for their heroes. The guide says this is a total win because since they're outside the kingdom's borders, the king hasn't claimed this land yet, meaning the boy doesn't have to pay him a single cent. Itanami is super hyped that he can finally farm in peace, but then the guy sticks his hand out and demands cash for the tour he just gave. The guide grabs his cash and bails, telling the kid he's officially done with the kingdom and doesn't care if he survives or not. Nori says goodbye, but he feels super guilty about taking their money since he doesn't have the skills they actually need to fight the demons. He looks out at the empty valley and realizes his brand new life starts right this second. Normally, heroes go on big quests, team up to win, and get famous for beating the final boss. But this kid doesn't care about any of that. As Utani starts his journey, he thinks the king and his people are honestly just pathetic. Walking past the empty rocks, he realizes he can finally live a quiet life. He tells himself he never wants to run into those guys again, so he's looking for a spot as far away from the kingdom as he can get. He stands right at the edge of the ocean, soaking in the cool breeze and thinking there's seriously no better place to be. He waved his hands around like a total madman, finally feeling free, and yelled that he was staying right here to build his own kingdom. Nari's first goal is to grab some water so he doesn't have to worry about it later, so he sits on the rocks to see if it's actually salty seawater. He scooped up a handful of water to give it a quick taste, and it turned out to be totally fresh lake water. He was stoked to see tentacles poking out from the rocks, but then he realized that octopuses don't even live in shallow fresh water. He's totally ignoring that lake octopus mystery for now because he's starving and needs to find some food, ASAP. He grabbed the tentacles to yank the creature out, but the ground was so slippery he started sliding straight toward the water. Itanami splashes back up with his eyes wide open, and that same octopus is still stuck right on his head. He stood up and was totally shocked by how salty the water felt, especially since it tasted like regular fresh water just a moment ago. Itanami needed to be 100% sure, so he reached down and scooped up another handful of water. With an octopus chilling on his head, he took another sip and realized the water was actually still good to drink. He's grinning like a maniac because the new world is absolutely wild, and as he climbs out of the water, he realizes he's totally got this, so he just rips an octopus off. Itanami chucks the octopus into the pot, but since he's got no spices, he just decides to boil it in salt water. Noari's hyped to start his very first fire, so he grabs his hunting knife and carves a hole and a notch into a dry stick. He jams the stick into the notch and spins it to get some hot coals going. Then he tosses them right onto the wood he prepped earlier. Itanami let out a breath and poured his entire soul into making his first ever flame. The kid gets straight to work, spinning the stick between his hands as fast as he can, and when a fire bursts to life on his very first try, it completely freaks out the robot who definitely... A sea creature is boiling in a pot while Nori whips up some plates and chopsticks. But as Itanami munches on an octopus tentacle, he's just thinking about how crazy fast that fire started. The kid flashes a confident smirk, proud of his insane survival skills, as he remembers Hephaestus calling his power the ultimate skill of superiority. Noiri thought over what the guy said and decided to test it out by standing right in front of a massive field of plants. He swings his sickle arm and shouts to unleash his Master of Supremacy ability. A massive shockwave followed his hand, smashing everything in its way. Autonomy was totally speechless. He couldn't believe he actually had this kind of power. The Hephaestus definitely didn't. He finally figured out what living the dream looks like. So he picks up a hoe and decides to do the exact same thing he did with the sickle. The moment he slams the tool into... He leaned down to see how the ground looked after using his skill. The dirt was plowed so perfectly that he didn't have to do anything else. The whole plot turned out massive just because that's... Itanami figures out that the Master of Excellence skill he got from Hephaestus basically multiplies the power of anything he holds in his hands. He knew this power would make farming a total piece of cake. He didn't just sit around, though. He kept putting in the work. He even took some weird seeds from the city and planted. Nori stands by his garden beds and finally takes a breather, feeling super proud of his hard work, even though he has no clue what he actually planted. If these things actually grow, he'll never. Waiting for his crops to grow was taking way too long, so he headed out to catch some fish for dinner instead. Itanami is just chilling and fishing on the beach, thinking he'd live way longer if he worked for the company. But thanks to her Hephaestus, he can actually control the waves. The kid is super hyped about this insane skill he got from the Faceless One, and he's determined to make sure Noire finally gets to eat some seaweed and rice. Just as he started spacing out, his rod suddenly jerked and he started yanking that line back with everything he had. The line pulled so hard he knew instantly he'd hooked a total monster. This long-haired girl suddenly pops out of the water and grabs the bait, leaving Itanami totally stunned by the crazy twist. He's totally freaking out and keeps yanking the rod on autopilot, because instead of catching a fish for dinner, he just reeled in a whole girl. He saw her all tangled up in fishing line, but then he spotted her tail and realized she was a legit mermaid. He snaps back to reality when the mermaid interrupts him, calling him a lowly peasant with a huge attitude. She's totally fuming that he actually fished her out of the water, and she screams that since he caught her, he's gotta marry her now. Those are just the rules of the new world. Itans was totally done with that talk and got right in their face in a split second. This dude just landed himself a wife in a whole new world. The mermaid is totally ticked off that she got caught by some local hillbilly. To her, there's literally nothing more. She's just sitting there with a hook in her mouth crying because autonomy actually caught her, and it's nothing like what the boy expected to see. With her mouth finally clear, the mermaid burst into tears because she felt totally ruined and knew things would never be the same again. Noari tries to point out she's the one who got herself hooked, but she won't even listen because mermaids are super proud and totally hate humans, so now he's just stuck. She screams at him in total shock that a nobody could actually drag a mermaid like her to the beach, and with her pride completely shattered, she's now trapped on land. The mermaid keeps screaming that this is all karma and she's stuck being his wife, so now autonomy has to step up and take full responsibility for her. This is all brand new to him, and he's heard that in this world, marrying someone from a different species is a total struggle. He stared at her tail and realized marriage was totally out of the question, certain that her big plans would never actually happen. She pulled out a bottle of some weird-looking liquid and started taking sip after sip. As soon as she downed the elixir, a massive flash of light exploded from her side and totally blinded the guy. Her tail slowly shifts into human legs, and the guy is so shocked he has to look away because she's standing there totally exposed from the waist down. The mermaid straight up says she'll never be happy on land, but now that she can have a baby, she's sure the guy will finally stop complaining about her. Itonami yells that he finally gets it and begs for something to cover up with. He realizes he totally freaked out and just went along with everything without thinking. Now he's just standing in. She's super mad when he yells that he won't marry her if she refuses to wear pants, and while they're by the flowers, Hitonami tells her he only makes clothes she. This young guy showed up to plow the field, but he was totally shocked to see sprouts already popping up out of the ground in record time. Suddenly, sprouts started popping up in every single bed, totally blowing the minds of the boy and his future wife standing right there. Go with. He wondered if this was the insane power he'd been gifted back then, especially since he remembered being told he'd have total mastery over every single tool he used. The girl was getting pretty curious about what her new husband was growing in the garden. The crazy part is, he didn't even know if he planted fruits, veggies, or something else. She calls the landlord a total pain. Itonami admits he's clueless about fish, and she knows her husband just wants some peace and quiet. Noir gives a smug smirk and tells them she's got this, promising that they can totally count on her. Mermaids are natural-born healers, and this girl is a total pro at it. But the guy is completely clueless about what they're talking about, and his lack of brains is really starting to... She's super hyped and tells him to just ask if he's confused, but then she starts stripping her pants off, making Itonami totally freak out. She sprinted to the water, yelling that she was going to grab some stuff from the house, and dove straight in to turn back into a mermaid. He was stuck just watching, wondering what the heck had even happened. He headed into the woods, thinking this mermaid was actually down to marry him, when all he really wanted was to get away from his crazy life. He grabbed a small hatchet, knowing there was no promise she'd ever come back, so Itonami got straight to work hacking at a tree to build himself a simple house. A little while later, he looks at his simple creation with a proud smile, just vibing all on his own. He's absolutely hyped because he never dreamed he'd finish a whole house in just an hour. Noiri's feeling like a total legend right now, so he crashes onto the bed too. While crashing after a long day, Itani realized he was probably only this weak because of that mermaid, and he was pretty sure she was never coming back anyway. Nori was fast asleep on his new bed when the girl suddenly showed up and woke him right up. The mermaid happily jumped into his arms, and since she'd taken that same potion, Autonomy got all confused and told her to put her pants back on, but the girl was super annoyed because she totally hates wearing them. He asked her where she'd been hiding all day. He was totally freaking out about her. She just gave him a look and turned away without saying a single word. The mermaid crosses her arms and snaps that this isn't a human problem, since she thinks regular people don't care about anything anyway. On her way out, she admitted she was actually pretty bad at cooking. As soon as she said cooking, the Eaton's ears perked right up. They were standing right. With a huge smile, she explains that mixing magic and different potions creates medicine with all kinds of crazy effects, and she even shows it off to the people who don't have any powers. Itonami asked about the cold medicine, but she just acted all proud and said she'd handle it once everything was ready to go. The mermaid dashes off to get what she needs, and while the guy tells her to be careful, he's actually planning to call her out for lying. But before he can say a word, this tuna is called Ba-ng. Its meat is actually packed with tons of mana. Nori has no idea what any of that means, though. He's not even shocked. She shreds the fish with just one hand, making Itanami realize her hands are basically living swords. The mermaid starts her cooking magic, getting the water boiling and keeping the pressure perfect. Then, suddenly she shows off the BANG fish fertilizer, but Wari is totally sketched out by it. If the kid tossed this fertilizer on his farm, he'd be harvesting his crops way faster. The mermaid was totally stoked and got right to work. Itonami wondered what her deal. When the next morning rolled around, every single plant was already bursting with fruit. Final check on one line in equals one line out. If the user considers the whole block one line, I provide one block. If the user considers the 3 sentences as 3, Iton is totally obsessed with eating his veggies. He tells the girl she's a super weird mermaid, and San is still watching him like he's completely lost it. She decided to grab a tomato off the bush to give it a shot, but after just one bite, she totally slumped over in disappointment, so Nori had to jump in and comfort her since he was totally wrong because his future wife thought it was delicious, and she was shocked that people on Earth actually eat stuff like this every single day. The mermaid yanked a carrot right out of the dirt, totally ready to see if this one tasted any different. Itanami stops her and explains that these veggies are different, telling her they actually need to be cooked before they can eat them, which makes the girl whine about it being too much work since she's... Noari starts cooking the meal right in the seawater while a mermaid chills on a rock next to the giant pot. He handed her the plate so she could finally taste how those same veggies could have a totally different flavor. Itanami is super nervous she'll hate his cooking, but the mermaid takes one sip of the soup and looks totally stoked because it tastes amazing. As he grabs a bowl of soup, he's clearly loving life and wishing every single day could be just like this. Still stuffing her face, she looks at her future husband and asks if people really get to eat food this amazing every single day. Itanami shuts that idea down and tells them the soup needs meat, plus he wants a special secret spice to make the whole dish taste insane. The mermaid is totally blown away that the food tastes even better now, and Nori explains it's all thanks to the seasonings. But first, he's gotta make some seasonings, specifically miso and soy sauce, to go with all that meat he's already got. The kid grins and says he needs some gear too, while Itanami is totally losing it because those veggies taste like a literal dream. Suddenly it hits him that he doesn't even know her name yet. But this mermaid-turned-human is actually called Plati. Ito was about to introduce himself, but then he realized that since he's in a whole new world, he might need a totally different name. Itanami flashed a big smile and introduced himself as Kadan, telling her he was super stoked to finally meet. Plati goes ham on her food while staring down her husband, and just like that, their wild daily life with a mermaid officially begins. Meet Kidan, an isekai traveler starting a wild new life with his mermaid wife. But he's already rubbing his sore back after a rough night sleeping on the hard floor. He noticed her bed was empty and just figured she'd already woken up and started her day. She looks human, but she's still a mermaid, and the guy is totally weirded out seeing her sleep on a board because she looks just like a fish on a cutting board. Kidan's really hoping the mermaid isn't mad about getting hooked, so he decides to stop overthinking and just ask her straight up. Just as he's about to leave, Plati lets out a scream so loud it scares off every bird nearby, and when Kidan asks what's wrong, she points to a creepy... He finally caught his breath and sighed in relief, realizing it was just a scarecrow he'd built himself, the very first one he ever made. Kidan explains it's a machine with moving arms and wooden swords for fingers, all just to scare birds away from the crops. She thinks the scarecrow can actually move to scare the birds, but the guy just laughs and tells her that's not how it works. He tells the girl that if she puts him in the middle of the field, the birds will think he's a real person and stay away from the crops, but he has no idea. He spins around and is totally shocked to see his creation moving, since he only built it to be a regular scarecrow for scaring birds. Kidan's jaw hits the floor as they actually start moving, and the girl is totally shocked even though she's the one who expected the scarecrow to budge. This shouldn't. Plati wondered why he was staring at his hand, and that's when her new husband dropped a total bombshell. He was actually summoned by a god from another world and didn't belong here at all. Kidding realized the scarecrow was acting weird because of his god-tier powers, and suddenly the girl figured everything out. She asked him if he was actually a summoned hero, which totally caught. Plati crosses her arms with a smirk, bragging that she totally knew every era uses magic to summon a hero from another world. She wondered about the guy since heroes have to hunt demons to save the world, and the blushing kid totally agreed with her. She rolls her eyes and asks what a hero is even doing in a place like this, but the happy cat just chills by the crops and admits he's hiding because he's totally over the hero life. The mermaid thinks this is super sketchy, but the boy is totally chill, just vibing with a fresh veggie in his hand while he listens to her talk. Plati asks if he's from a tribe that sticks together. because people from another world are usually so weak that a monster would take them out the second they're alone. The guy doesn't even try to argue with his wife, and while she thinks he's someone special, he just sits by the bushes and disagrees. Grinning with a tomato in his hand, Plotty's totally stumped. Is this guy actually a beast or just a total weakling? Meanwhile, he's right behind her just chilling and snacking on a juicy tomato. Still crouching there, he tells her he saw her sneaking off earlier that morning. He was actually worried that something bad had happened to her. This totally catches Plotty off guard. The guy really put. She yells back that she's just going to the bathroom, obviously, and wonders why humans are so nosy while Keaton just shrugs, feeling totally awkward. He asks her where she handles her business, but then it hits him. She just goes right in the sea. After a quiet second, it all finally clicked, so he sat down to dig a makeshift toilet. But he totally forgot one massive thing about staying alive. Humans are actually super weak when they're all by themselves. Even a tiny bug can be a total nightmare, not to mention actual wild animals. He's honestly so lucky he's living with. But then he stops and wonders what she actually thought about all the time they spent together. Plotty comes back from wherever she was and holds out a plate, totally flexing that starfish. Keaton asks what's on the plate, and the girl tells him it's actually a type of sea monster. She explains that this beast sucks up every bit of organic matter in. Plotty says these monsters can actually clean the water, but the boy is still totally clueless about what they really are. She wanted to show him how the sea cleaners really work, so she pulls out a pocket knife and holds the blade against her arm. After making a cut, she pours her blood into a jar full of. Plotty looks super proud as he tells him to watch exactly what this sea monster, the sea cleaner, can really do. The cadet grabs the girl's arm and squeezes her forearm as hard as he can. He starts screaming at her because of what he just did. Platia just stares back with a. Looking totally stressed, the guy tells her she's gotta stop doing this because he's actually super worried. And after cooling off, he admits he's just a shy, awkward dude and says, Keaton is constantly freaking out because of the power God gave him. But Plotty steps up and tells him she actually really likes him, totally shutting down his worries. Since she's his wife now, she promises to always have his back, leaving Kidan totally shocked and blushing like crazy. The mermaid thought he'd be totally against it, but nope. She just crossed her arms with a smirk and told him a wife's job is to always have her husband's back. He flashes a big grin and thanks her, but she just turns away acting all stuck up because she's totally blushing. With the toilet finally finished, that's one less thing to worry about, and Plotty reminds them it's time to go grab some breakfast. Far across the ocean, creepy sounds echo from a dark cave where a demon senses something dangerous is heading his way. Plotty calls Gaiden over to show off her new fit, swapping her old pants for a skirt she made herself. She was just wearing trousers yesterday, but now she's spinning around and telling him. He starts stuttering and tries to say it's not worth the trouble, but the mermaid tells him to chill, acting like it's totally normal for a wife to make sure she looks amazing for. Holding her briefcase, she says she left a long time ago, and while Kidan is still totally confused, she gets a huge grin and tells him she actually found a dungeon. Then the kid starts wondering what a dungeon actually is. To him, it's just a place to find loot, hit an underground shop, or fight some big evil before reaching the boss on the top floor. He asked Plotty what this dungeon was even like, but she told him it's way better to just see it and started dragging him to go faster. They finally reached this super rocky cave that was way out in the opposite direction from where they lived. Keaton is totally wiped out after trekking for 2 whole hours to reach this cave. Plotty actually stumbled onto this dungeon while he was just out working in the fields. This is a cave. Before the guy even knew what hit him, a massive gust of wind snatched him up and sucked him straight into the dungeon. Keaton felt like some invisible monster was licking his whole face, leaving Plate totally confused by the weird and shocking look he was making. Energy flows all over the world, but in some spots it gets stuck and starts building up. This whole place turns into a straight-up dungeon. All that thick mana starts swirling together until it morphs into a beast. And just like that, a brand new monster is born right inside these. Kadana was shaking with fear, but her face was totally burning up. Going into a dungeon like this was definitely going to end in a disaster. There was no stopping Plotty now, because they were. Wiping away his sweat, he felt so relieved his wife was actually this powerful. Honestly, beating a whole dungeon is a total nightmare. All she has to do is crush the enemies in. After everything that went down, he knew he had to protect her now that they were officially married, so he told her to wait up, leaving her totally stunned since he hadn't even hinted. Kidden rushed straight to her side, telling her he was doing this for her husband and they were going in together. As they step inside, the rough cave stones vanish and are replaced by smooth brick walls. Bright torches line the hallway, lighting up every corner of the path. The boy looks around and realizes, She freezes up when she sees a creepy cloud of black smoke heading her way. The mermaid stays on high alert, ready for anything. She screams at Keaton to get out of there as fast as he can. They've finally broken loose. The husband is totally frozen behind his wife as she gears up to fight the demons, and while the kid is paralyzed with fear, Pletty screams at her man. She grabbed 3 tubes of mystery liquid and chucked them at the beast while sprinting at full speed. The monsters spun around like a crazy whirlwind and just dissolved into dust, leaving nothing behind but a dark shadow. Kitten is totally stunned as the monster charging them turns into straight-up dust, but Pletty warns him that this is only the beginning. There were only 3 test tubes. One freezes them solid, another shocks the beasts with electricity, and the last one is a crazy acid that melts every single bit of flesh until only the bones are left. Pletty flexes her confidence, bragging that mermaids are total pros at making battle potions, while her husband is left completely traumatized by the nightmare he just saw. The girl charges ahead and wipes out the rest of the monsters, but even after she saves him, Keaton calls her the most dangerous creature of them all. He knew his wife was brave, but there was no way he was letting her handle this mess alone. Without his gear, he was basically useless in a real fight. Suddenly, he spotted something. Keaton grabbed the massive sword, totally hyped that his master's skills would make his attacks hit like a truck. But watching the girl toss his potions around made him wonder if he'd even get to use the thing. He called out to his wife to wait up because he was totally wiped out, telling her he'd already won and was heading home soon. So she just nodded and kept moving while he asked her how many monsters they'd actually taken down. The girl is scanning the dungeon looking totally freaked out because the whole place feels super wrong, and the guy is hanging on every word she says. She was right about the dungeon being safe for now, but the big boss monster is definitely lurking somewhere deep ahead. She turned to face Keaton and swapped the title Commander-in-Chief Monster for just Boss, so her clueless husband could actually understand what was going on. She's saying there's a boss in this dungeon, and since boss caves are super rare, this place is actually insanely dangerous. She breaks it down for Keaton, explaining that only 2 kinds of bosses can rule the main dungeons, and the first one is a dragon. Just like at the cave entrance, a wild storm of magic hits them all over again. It's so powerful that it actually shoves the guy backward. Pletty stays totally calm and doesn't. Something super creepy is closing in on them in this dungeon, and the group is just standing their ground, waiting for the big boss to finally show its face. Keaton asks Pletty if they're facing a dragon, but his wife overhears and warns them that this thing is way scarier than any dragon. Meet the big boss, the king of the dead who has 0 life in him. He's looming over everyone like a giant, creepy moon. Looking at his eyes, it's obvious. Keaton is shaking with fear and asks what that monster is, so the girl gears up for a fight and tells him it's a legendary magician or high priest. Then you've got the immortal king, the absolute boss of the undead who was born with crazy magic and was a total genius from day one. Running into a super strong undead king in a dungeon means only one thing. You're about to die a slow and painful death. Keaton's life is just getting started and he's not about to let it end yet, so he refuses to back down. The king of the undead blasts out a surge of energy and says he feels a weird power, so he's gonna turn the kid into a living corpse to be his new best friend. She hurls her potions at the demon, but even though his skull melts for a second, it just snaps back together with his crown, proving her magic is totally useless against him. Keaton saw the monster healing up, but the girl wasn't shocked at all because she already knew this demon was straight up immortal. Facing a scary enemy, Pletty yells that she's got tons of potions and tells him to get out of there as fast as he can. As soon as he hears that, he starts wondering if he should just bail to save his own skin. He could totally go back to his normal life just like he planned, but he screams out that he saw the potions weren't doing a thing, so he grabbed his sword and charged straight at the undead king. Keaton yelled that he was her husband and he was saving her, so he dove straight at the magical monster that could end him in a split second. His words really hit home for her, and just as he lunges in like a hawk to land the final blow, the king suddenly shouts for him to stop. Wait! He literally just flopped onto the floor and said he was quitting, leaving Keaton and Pletty standing there totally stunned. The king is terrified of getting hurt, and he definitely didn't expect the kid to unleash the holy sword's insane power. The kid was totally stunned and just shoved his holy sword right in front of his face. Pletty just stayed quiet and didn't even try to jump into their conversation. Then the monster straight up asked. That monster looked like the literal Grim Reaper. But then it realized that was the holy sword from its dungeon. So Keaton said sorry and tried to give it back. The undead king claimed the blade was his, but since the holy sword has its own will, it decided to pick the young man as its true owner instead. The undead king finally lost his treasure, and he's actually relieved that his mission in this world is finally over. He begs the kid to kill him with the sword because he's stuck living forever. Only this blade has the power to finally set the king free. But the kid is totally refusing to do it. He says he's actually from another world where God gave him a cheat code to master every tool perfectly, which is definitely why Kidon can use the holy sword. The monster dropped to its knees and screamed that this was the legendary gift from the gods, a power so insane it was way beyond any normal skill. Anyone who gets a blessing from God is a straight-up hero, and these guys are basically holy legends. The undead king bows to a totally confused Kidan, then turns to the people blessed by the gods and asks them for a bit of their immunity. The guy is totally stunned and begs them not to give him a higher rank, but Plato totally expected her husband to be this cool. The undead king is totally confused about why this guy even showed up. So Keaton explains he just moved in nearby. But then the girl jumps in and says their main job is basically just taking down monsters. They literally bake monster fur and bones right into magic gear. Believe it or not, some of that stuff is actually delicious. The girl looked totally hyped as she explained this with a huge smile. Her husband was totally over it because even though they were being treated so well, she just thought it was super convenient to have a dungeon right next door. He's super hyped and asks to go totally wild in the dungeon, and the king actually lets him since he wanted to crush those monsters himself anyway, so these kids are really doing him a massive. Plate is super hyped and thanks the undead king for giving him the green light. He thinks the whole plan is totally fine, so the two of them just stand there grinning. But right behind, realizing they were actually becoming buddies with the king, the girl introduced herself in Kidan. She told him she was dying to meet the evil spirits. He tried to think of an answer but suddenly realized he's pretty sure he was a high-ranking priest in his past life, and the mermaid is hanging on to every word her new friend says. He was ditched and hunted by the church until he ended up in this dungeon, where some creature sucked up all the mana to cast a massive spell that totally wiped him out. He spent hundreds of years trapped in that place, and even though he's finally free, he's totally forgotten his own name, which actually makes the king start to cry. The couple feels totally heartbroken for the lifeless king, and they're honestly crushed that he had to go through such a tragic story. The guy claimed he was just a tired old man who'd lost his will to live. But once those kids showed up, his soul-crushing boredom finally started to fade, and the king was actually pretty hyped about it. Platy caught Kidan grinning as he told his new buddy to come visit any time for a veggie feast, and the kid even called the king sensei. She leaned in and asked why her husband gave him that name since it belonged to a famous priest. But it turns out the kid was the one who actually picked it. Those words finally reached the dead king who'd been stuck in that dungeon for centuries after a spell took him out. So he stayed on his knees and thanked them for being so kind, and Kidan rushes for the exit and screams to his sensei that the sword won't let go, making the king burst out laughing while the girl realizes the blade is totally obsessed with him, and just like that, he's the new owner of the holy sword. Keaton yelled out in pure excitement that it was finally done, looking totally stoked about the awesome thing he just created. Plutty asked about her husband's new building, and he showed her that it was actually a huge forage furnace. He pulls out his holy sword and stares at its insane power, watching it slice through a boulder like butter, while the girl drops a hint about what the weapon is really meant for. The mermaid was super curious about why he was building a forge, so he reminded her about the gift he got from the lifeless king, Sensei. Plati finally realized this guy was talking about the manor medal the sensei gave the boy as a huge thank you. She totally worships him as the best teacher ever, and since the magic in this dungeon is so thick, it literally turns into super rare mana metal they can just take. Plati's dying to see what the kid does next. Since he finally scored this rare metal, he can craft that one item he's been dreaming about forever. He's totally. While Keaton hammers away, the girl watches in total awe because he's forging with pure mana. And since a good magic sword costs at least 10 gold, she knows this thing is going to be top tier. He shows off his new gear, revealing a frying pan and a knife with a blade that's insanely sharp. Keaton is acting like a total kid over his new kitchen gear, while the girl is completely zoned out thinking about a magic sword and wondering what makes it so special. The kid starts naming everything one by one, but since showing is way better than just talking, he gets right to work and starts cooking. Kidian chops up the veggies and tosses them into a magical frying pan he literally just forged. He puts on a show seasoning the food like a total pro, and the girl is super hyped to finally get a taste. The kid whipped up some stir-fried veggies, a brand new addition to his menu. Plenty's eyes lit up as she cheered, totally obsessed with how sweet and tasty it was, while the mermaid finally snaps out of it and is totally confused why he's wasting this legendary mana metal. But the boy is just vibing with the stuff because it glows, stays hot without. Now he's got another recipe under his belt, and he looks way happier here than he ever did back in his old world. Platy felt a total jolt of excitement and asked what he was planning to cook, so the guy, who was having a blast with his new kitchen tool, told her he had plenty of ideas, but they'd need to. She snaps and demands to know what else he could possibly need, but all he can think about is how badly he wants some meat. He's hyped for the meal and says adding meat is a total game changer, making her super excited to dig in right before she asks him to go somewhere with her. They're trekking through the woods, and Plotty is hyped because as a mermaid, she's never actually seen the mountain monsters she's been dying to eat. He grips his sword, thinking they're just going on a normal hunt, and while she knows there are birds and deer around, she's only interested in cooking up some massive mountain monsters. Plotty's all hyped up because she heard mountain monsters taste amazing, and Kaden realizes these beasts are basically the ultimate bargaining chips in this world. Then she asks her husband what he thinks about caves, like how he thinks monsters are even born in them. Inside this cave dungeon, the undead King Sensei uses his powers to control all the monsters and keep them from ever leaving. If monsters are lurking here, then this whole mountain is basically a massive dungeon, and she's trying to explain it clearly so he finally gets it and stops asking so many questions. They come to a halt, and the kid is totally stunned that a dungeon like this is just sitting right here. But he's low-key annoyed that there aren't any normal animals around for them to eat. As they push into the dark forest, a bunch of glowing eyes stare back from the shadows, revealing a pack of monster boars that are totally looking for a fight. Plotty was totally hyped about the discovery, but Kaden was sweating bullets, looking like he'll never get used to this crazy new world. He's terrified because those boars are clearly looking for a fight, but the girl knows exactly what they are. Square boars. Bloody is jumping for joy because this place is awesome with 2 dungeons right nearby, but Keaton is totally freaked out and can't figure out why they're even happy about it. She pulls out her potions and gets ready to scrap, telling her terrified husband to hold them off while she promises to end this fast. The boars started lunging at the kid with the holy sword, and even though he wasn't ready, he had to lock in and do what needed to be done. With that insane sword in his hand, he wiped out every single beast one by one before they could even touch him. Behind him is a massive pile of dead monsters. Kidan grips his weapon, totally out of breath from the fight. Plotty starts jumping around, cheering about how awesome he was. She didn't. The kid wasn't even looking for a scrap, claiming he only won because they came at him one by one, but at least they're finally eating something besides boring veggies, and the mermaid is totally hyped to start cooking. They had a massive pile of meat, so she suggested chopping it up for cooking, and while they used a potion to freeze it, Kidan decided to build a wheelbarrow and a fridge too. In no time at all, he finished building exactly what he planned, a fridge and a wheelbarrow totally loaded with supplies. He asks his wife about the ice potions, but she just crosses her arms and acts offended that he'd even doubt her, especially since she's got a massive stash ready to go. Keaton gets all teary-eyed realizing their lives are finally looking up, and for the girl, that's the only thing that really matters. She listens in and tells him this is how he'll level up his cooking, so she demands he hurry it up while he just laughs at how she's acting. Wild boar is basically just pork, and if he wants to turn it into the ultimate meal, he's definitely making tonkatsu. He wipes the drool off his face while dreaming of that crispy tonkatsu. But his wife is totally fuming that he's actually enjoying himself in his head. He can't even sleep because he's stressing over their low food supplies. Baking bread is going to be a total disaster. The real deal breaker is that they're missing. He asks if this world has eggs like the ones from back home, but she gets totally annoyed and tells him only humans on land do that weird stuff because you'll never see anything like it in the Mermaid Kingdom. Pletty points out a crow that just landed in the field, but Kidden says there's no way they're cooking that thing. She comes up with a crazy plan to head back to the mountains and find that monster bird, but he's totally not having it. While he's busy thinking about taking down those monsters, a massive beast is soaring through the sky right behind him, getting closer by the second. The guy suddenly felt someone pushing against his back. He was totally caught off guard. He spun around to see what was going on. The girl was just staring at the monster with her jaw on the... Platty thinks it's just a bird or a plane, but Kidam realizes it's a massive meteor screaming right at them. The monster zoomed right in, whipping up a massive windstorm, and that's when they finally saw who it was. The girl stayed pretty chill, but Kid N was absolutely terrified. He's coming for their souls because they broke into his dungeon, and as she points to the mountain, Plotty realizes it's actually the dragon's lair while Cadence just stands there totally. Trapped in the crazy wind from those massive wings, she realized right then that this dragon was the true king of the dungeon. The kid is literally crying as he screams at the mermaid about the dungeon having no boss, making her realize she's actually drawn to his crazy strength. Her name is Grinsel Dragonshroud, and she's demanding to know who broke into her Royal Mountain dungeon and wiped out her minions, even though she already knows this kid is the one who did it. He covers his face and tries to talk his way out of it, claiming they had no idea this mountain actually belonged to someone. That massive winged beast is still towering right over them. Keaton starts begging for mercy and swears he'll never come back. But the dragon isn't even listening. Grinsel the dragon. These weaklings barged into her home and did whatever they wanted. Those humans completely disrespected her. That's why she's going to wipe every single one of them out. Grinsel is ready to wipe away the mess they made, and he gets so heated that he blasts them with fire to turn them straight into ash. Her fire blasts across the entire land like a massive shockwave, leaving Platy and Kaiden totally frozen with no idea what to do. The girl is freaking out thinking they're dead meat, but the boy finally snaps back to reality and remembers his holy sword. He swung his weapon like a total legend, shielding Platy from the fire with his own body while trying to block the dragon's massive attack. He sliced right through the flames, and if he'd been even a second slower, they would have been toast. Shroud, the Grinsel dragon, is totally shocked by this. She always, gasping for air and totally exhausted, the boy actually pulled it off and saved them both from certain death, while the girl finally realized what was happening and started to freak out. Floating mid-air, Dragon Shroud is totally shocked a human blocked her death breath, but Keaton's only worried about his wife, who's just smiling because she knew he'd pull it off. He didn't just reflect that deadly breath, he completely wiped out the fire, and after seeing the seedlings were safe, he gave the dragon a look so intense it made Grinsel actually shake with fear. He acted like a total gentleman, bowing and apologizing for breaking into the dungeon. But he had one tiny catch. He points his sword right at the dragon and shouts that he's ready to fight the ruler to protect everything he cares about. He points his holy sword straight at the dragon and dares it to a fight to the death. But honestly, he's just praying the monster gets scared and leaves. Grinsel Dragon Shroud spotted the sword in the brave kid's hand and whipped around to face him. The dragon was dying to say something about the sword he was holding. The guy had no other ideas, so he just decided to speak his mind. Keaton whips out his blade and reveals it's the exact holy sword Grinsel was looking for. This is the legendary weapon given to him by the immortal king himself, and the dragon slams onto the ground and tells him he's dead wrong, making the poor guy completely freeze up in terror. Turns out this holy sword actually belongs to the dragon Grinsel Vale. The monster reached out to grab its treasure. The kid was absolutely terrified. Suddenly, the dead king started talking directly to the dragon. Just like the dragon Grinsel, the guy was totally caught off guard when the master suddenly jumped in front to shield Kitten. He dropped a massive attack that sent everyone flying back, and Sensei just shoved the other lord right out of the way. With the winged monster dead on the floor, the master turned around and took the blame for everything, saying he was super sorry. The young guy was totally confused and had no idea what he meant. The immortal king explained he was hunting for mountain intruders, and checked the dragon first, but the dragon just called him a pathetic corpse for trespassing right before Sensei brought up Kidan's new neighbor. Cursing his annoying neighbor, the dragon took off to find the brat who dared to mess with his turf. The undead king realized he totally screwed up and gave a nervous laugh while explaining the whole. He's feeling pretty guilty since they actually did sneak onto Dragon Mountain without asking. And since he's convinced they're the ones at fault, Sensei stays quiet because he's human too. Dungeons aren't just for loot. They're the go-to spot for food, building supplies, and making some serious daily cash. The undead king says this is the exact reason why people form squads to take down dungeons. The immortal king tells Grinsel Vale that for a dungeon master, dealing with invaders is just another day on the job, and the dragon can only gulp in fear. He points right at his powerful winged neighbor, calling him totally shameless for throwing a tantrum and leaving his post just because a tiny part of the dungeon got captured. Grinsel Vale is sweating bullets while getting chewed out, and it's honestly embarrassing how such a powerful guy is acting like a total brat. Even after being so petty, he actually thinks staring right into the dragon's eyes, the sensei tells him Keaton isn't even on his level, and orders him to get back to his mountain, making the boy freeze up behind him. Grinsel straight up rejects the immortal king's demands because he can't wrap his head around why some weakling has that sword. His dad told him to take the blade from The dead king explains that the sword has its own mind and chose him specifically, making Kidan feel totally hyped by his teacher's words. Back when the dragon's dad was still around, he realized just how scary that immortal girl's power really was. He was actually terrified of her, unlike Grinsel Vale, the dragon is totally losing it and won't take that for an answer. So now he's ready to fight this human to the death to get his hands on the geyser dragon's treasure. So the undead king of spirits challenged the monster to a fight, and the massive beast just hissed right back at him. He spins around to fly away, ditching the fight for once, and yells for the kid to remember this day, while a desperate Kidan begs the shocked Grinsel Vale to just wait a second. The kid grabbed the monster's tail in a panic and slammed it face first into the ground, leaving him totally shocked that it actually worked. Grinsel snaps and starts screaming at the kid, calling him a total loser for even touching him. The poor kid freaks out and jumps back, apologizing over and over. Then Sensei speaks up. Kitten turns to the dragon and asks him to stay for dinner if he's not in a rush, leaving Grinsel Dragon and Shroud totally confused by what this kid is thinking. He shows off a dish made from a dungeon dragon boar, and even though Kuden is nervous the beast won't like the steak, he still steps up to offer it. Grinsel stared at the tiny piece of meat for a second, then just tossed it right into her huge mouth. Loving every bite, the dragon stood tall and roared that it was delicious, letting off a massive explosion that sent a shockwave through the whole area. The dragon blasts a massive gust of air that sends the kid flying, then leans in to say the food was amazing, and Kitten is totally stoked that the dungeon lord loved his steak so much. Grinsel's still hungry for more meat, and Pletty gets so jealous she starts begging for a steak too, leaving the boy totally hyped even though he's lost track of how much food he still has to cook. Suddenly, a crazy bright light flashes behind the kids, and when they spin around, they see Grinsel glowing like a literal light bulb, leaving Kidon and Pletty totally stunned. The dragon starts glowing and begins to shrink right before their eyes. Everyone just stands there, totally stunned by what they're seeing. That massive, terrifying beast is getting smaller and smaller every single second. Meet Grinsel Dragon, a tiny girl in a super fluffy dress and bow-tied pigtails who just made a seriously graceful entrance. The newlyweds are completely shocked to see the dragon turn into a little girl, and while Kidan had no clue the beast was even female, Sensei explains that dragons actually have the power to take on human forms. Grinsel is literally drooling for more food as she yells that his steak was the best and she's gonna love him forever. The girl jumps up and demands her meat right now, which totally ticks off Pletty since she's actually next in line. So Kidan starts frying up a ton of extra food to make sure everyone is fed. The undead king finally took a bite of the food, and man, it was totally worth it. He actually ended up loving the steak. Seeing that made the kid super hyped, just like his teacher. Keaton says he just used basic garlic, salt, and pepper for this simple meal. But the immortal king is stunned because even the royal palace can't make food that tastes this amazing. Shroud the dragon is totally stuck on the ground after eating way too many steaks, telling Keaton to stop acting so cocky while a mermaid with a massive food baby is just chilling right next to her. The girl gets super serious and tells him to stop acting cool because she's still coming for that holy sword. But after he reminds her she's just not ready yet, he apologizes and she gave in for now. But she was totally planning to roast this guy to ashes with her death breath and just snatch that sword for herself. Pletty sits down and reminds her that if she goes through with this, she'll never get to eat those legendary steaks again. That's when Grinsel realized there was a massive whirlwind wraps around her as she transforms into a dragon, shouting that she'll definitely take Kidan's sword one day, but until then, she's just coming back to eat his food. The kid agreed and said his goodbyes, telling them he's down to help whenever. And just as Shroud the Grinsel dragon started taking off, Pletty told her to wait. She asks if there are any monster birds in her dungeon to cook for her husband, but Grinsel warns her they're way too bony to actually taste good. The mermaid isn't looking for meat, she just wants those eggs, and Shroud the dragon is totally lost on why they even need them. Pletty gets all hyped up and says that if they find some eggs, Keaton can make the meat taste even better, which totally blows Grinsel's mind. She whipped around and zoomed back home, while the mermaid begged that winged monster to stop making those crazy wind gusts. Pletty perks up her ears and brags that she's a monster expert, asking to join the trip, and Kidan is totally floored that his wife actually wants to fly with the ruler. Shroud the Grinsel dragon didn't even hesitate, and a second later, she's soaring into the sky with Pletty on her back, leaving the boy and the dead king far behind. Anne was totally shocked, just watching the girls fly off while Pletty screamed that she wasn't going home without a win. The dead king thinks the whole scene looks like a beautiful painting, and the boy doesn't even hesitate to agree. He looks up at the massive sky with a grin, saying this is way better than just sitting around being bored. Kidan shows his wife what he made, and as she stutters in disbelief, he confirms her darkest thoughts by revealing he literally turned a human into that sword. Pletty's eyes glow as he stares at the blade, claiming this mana metal sword will be the strongest one in the world, second only to the holy sword. She's already seeing dollar signs because she's sure he's gonna sell it. This thing is worth a literal fortune. But her dreams of being rich get totally wrecked. He totally leveled up Kakashi, turning the field scarecrow into a moving machine, and the kid is super stoked about what he did. She couldn't figure out why they were so focused on Kakashi, and the mermaid looked totally lost. But Kidan told her to relax since they still had plenty of mana metal left. She went from a frown to a huge smile, hyped that the scarecrow's blades would finally wreck those annoying birds, even though the guy was totally clueless. The kids stared at what the living dummy had done while Kakashi pulled off a mana sword slash, effortlessly shredding that bird into pieces. Keaton screams at the scarecrow that killing is strictly banned on his turf, making the mermaid pretty annoyed since that's basically impossible, and poor Kakashi-kun can't even swat at the birds mocking him from way up high. The kid looked super relieved and happy, but Platy was totally lost on why her husband gave swords to a scarecrow. The kid gets this dark, hyped-up look and screams that it's so awesome, his eyes literally sparkling with joy. Keaton is busy brainstorming the perfect gear for Kakashi, while the girl just says she'll never understand why guys get so hyped over stuff like this. Keaton is just chilling by the massive ocean with a sword on his back and a rod in his hand, having a blast since it's been way too long since he last went fishing. He remembered that time he went fishing and thought he hooked a monster, but he actually caught a mermaid and got married on the spot. So he decided right then to start his new life with Ploy. This average worker just got yanked into a fantasy world. He thought he'd finally get to relax, but that definitely didn't happen. His life got way more exciting after To escape all the crazy noise, the kid headed out to go fishing, and man, he really needed this break. Out of nowhere, a massive splash echoes across the water as a boy with fish fins on his head emerges from the horizon, scaring the life out of Keaton. He looked at the kid and asked if he was Platy's friend, since the boy was acting like total besties with the merman. The monster definitely wasn't a fan of this stranger. He crawled out of the nasty, deep water and made it clear he was there to kill him. Kidan heard the threat and a whole army of mermaids in battle gear starts rising from the ocean, and their leader yells for them to take out the guy on the shore along with anyone else who gets in their way. The mermaid warriors heard their leader's command and charged at the stunned kid on like a massive crashing wave. They slowly closed in and pointed their tridents right at the kid, who just stood there totally frozen with his mouth wide open. Snapping back to reality, Keaton grabbed his holy sword by the hilt and let it rip. With just one flick of his hand, the kid summons a massive tornado that sends all those attacking warriors spinning through the air. Keaton stood there totally stunned by what he'd just done, having no clue what to do next while the broken warriors drifted and gurgled in the sea. This stressed-out Playtie came sprinting toward the noise, totally freaked out by the chaos while being so far from her husband. And even though the boy tried to explain everything, Suddenly, someone pops out of the water and shouts her name, having been sucked into that crazy holy sword tornado just like her. She's totally shocked to see a familiar face, but it turns. They're standing just a few feet apart in total silence, and Kidan is completely clueless because Platy never even mentioned she had a brother. Suddenly, every mermaid warrior swarmed the girl and started calling her a princess, leaving Kidan totally blown away by what was happening. The girl stared at the ocean as mermaids splashed around, calling for Princess Highness to make sure she was safe, and that's when Platy decided it was time to finally introduce herself. The guy who tried to take out her husband is actually her own big brother, Prince Arowana, the next heir to the throne. The kid's jaw hit the floor when he realized he wasn't just looking at a princess, but the prince himself was standing right there. Platy crosses her arms with a smirk, reminding him she totally told him she was a princess. Then she turns to her big brother to introduce the guy, while the prince just stands there looking completely lost. Suddenly, the princess yells that this guy Kidan is actually her husband. She isn't worried about the trouble at all, but the boy is absolutely terrified. He's so freaked. The whole mermaid army and the prince were totally blown away, and every single one of them stood there with their jaws on the floor. Platy stands her ground and tells her brother she knows he's there to take her home, but she's officially done with the mermaid kingdom, and wants him to tell their parents she's not coming back. The prince is absolutely fuming that this land dweller snatched his sister, so he roars at his army to start the fight all over again. Platy's big brother calls her husband a total scumbag, and is ready to delete him from the planet just to get his little sister back. The princess screams for him to stop worrying and just fight back. But the boy with the holy sword is terrified to strike because he knows these people are actually close to her. A massive gust of wind slams into Platy and Kidan from behind, blowing the fish right back into the ocean and totally wrecking their second shot. A massive gust of wind hits as Vale the dragon dives toward the noise from the sea, and the prince is totally stunned that the dungeon master himself actually showed up. A whole army of mermaid warriors is shaking in their boots because of this beast. They're terrified the dragon is gonna gobble them all up. They think he could wipe out their entire squad with just... Grinzel Dragon lands right next to the humans and asks if they're doing all right. Keaton thanks him for the save, while the prince just stands there shocked that regular people are... The beast just laughed, saying he couldn't eat that tasty meat if the kid disappeared, but Plenty told him not to get a big head just because he got a thank you. Her big brother tried to say something to the three creatures, but the dragon realized he was standing there all by himself. The prince spins around to find the sea completely empty, and since he didn't run away from Grinzel, the geyser dragon's daughter, she promises to reward him by turning him into... Kaiden smashed the monster's knee to put it in its place, making the beast let out a massive howl of pain. The kid drops a bombshell that the guy in the ocean is actually Pletty's brother, which totally shocks Vale. Then Keaton randomly asks the prince to grab some dinner, and he reaches out his hand, offering to talk things through calmly and explain what's going on so they can just get to know each other. The prince wasn't buying the nice guy act at all, thinking it was just a big setup. He totally shut him down and refused to listen to anything he had to say. Plotty suddenly. The husband snaps at his wife, yelling that she's totally wrong because her brother only came all this way since he's actually worried about her. He's all ears for every single word the prince has to say, and the girl was totally shocked by his reaction. The older brother heard this and did a total 180, while Keaton was left blinded by the insane light glowing from the prince. Since he's a prince, he can't just back out now. His honor's on the line, so he steps up to the challenge. The boy is totally shocked that his brother just walked out of the sea naked, not even blushing. Keaton screams at him to cover up, and while the brother thinks he's being a total jerk, the girl already saw this coming and hands him some underwear. He realized his wife had already dealt with this exact same mess, so he hit up his brother to come over. Vale is super stressed and tells Platty that Keaton is about to feed him, making it the perfect time to test out a brand new recipe, but she just stands there in dead silence. The big brother takes one look at their new house and calls it total trash. He can't believe Keaton is letting a mermaid princess live in such a dumpy place. And now Platty is... The prince is literally standing there in his underwear, screaming at the guy for treating his sister like a slave, until Platty points out another building nearby. This barn is where they stash all the meat from the mountains and veggies from the fields. The big brother is totally blown away by how massive it is, and those strange-looking walls. Keaton. She points out another building where they ferment stuff, and Keaton gets all starry-eyed talking about the miso and soy sauce they're waiting for, while his big brother just stands there completely lost because he's never heard those words before. Platty realizes her husband knows stuff they don't, since he's a master chef and a total beast in a fight. Honestly, Keaton can do everything. That warehouse the girl showed us is actually her secret magic room. And since Keaton is a top-tier husband who always looks out for her, the boy offers the prince a seat while our guy just whipped up a fresh meal and finished building a sweet garden table. But when he goes to invite everyone for tea, he finds a girl already chilling right there. Big Bro is super confused about where this kid came from, but Keaton explains it's just Grinzel Vale in her human form, and she's already rushing him to bring out the next dish. The prince is totally shocked to see a dragon right in front of him, but Platty gets annoyed and says this is just how she looks when she's hungry. Keaton's serving up a brand new dish called zenzai, and get this, while he was growing soybeans, some adzuki beans popped up too. Everyone grabbed their forks and started digging in, but the brother was being super careful since he'd never tried this stuff before. Everyone dug into the dessert soup at the same time and loved it. But while the siblings were enjoying the flavor, Vale asked for seconds only to find out the pot was totally empty. These beans actually popped up totally by mistake. There was only a tiny batch of them to go around. Now everyone is losing it because these delicious snacks are all gone. The girls snapped at the prince, yelling that his timing was terrible and that he was the reason there was no soup left. The older brother drops to his knees to apologize, treating Keaton like some legendary master. And even though Keaton tells him to stop, the prince is totally convinced his sister is head over heels. He told her he was trusting her with his sister, and while Platty was totally stoked, Keaton wasn't so sure it was a good idea. He's totally confused why everyone is so against it, but once he hears she's a mermaid princess, he realizes a royal like her can't just pick her own husband that easily. He kept thinking about how everyone was putting so much pressure on her, but she just started yelling that it wasn't like that at all. She told him she was only married to him, and the brother tries to calm his sister down, telling her that Mr. Saint is totally clueless about his wife's situation. The prince tried to come clean, but Vale stopped him because humans and demons were already fighting for control of the surface, and since the neutral mermaids were now caught in the middle, they were being forced. The brother is totally blown away that she knows she's been reminding him of her true self for hundreds of years, and she hears it all whether she likes it or not. Humans and magical monsters are stuck in a massive war, and Keaton just got summoned as the hero to take them all down. My brother says both sides are going to start messing with things way more, so now the rulers are being forced to pick a side. If the mermaids don't pick a side soon, they're going to be hunted by everyone, and right now the kingdom's big bosses are arguing over which race Platty should marry. Her brother is sure that Platty has to run away to save the kingdom, so since they're finally meeting in peace, he's going to step up as a big brother and make her wish come true. The prince turns to her and says he's just glad she found a great guy, and honestly, she's absolutely beaming after hearing that. The brother drops to his knees and begs to protect his sister by making their marriage official, and even though Keaton tells him to stop, he's actually totally down to make it happen. Suddenly, Vale crashed their conversation to ask about marriage, and the guy got super embarrassed but admitted he was totally down for it. Shroud is actually marrying the Grinsel dragon, which leaves Keaton totally stunned while Platy shoots a super jealous look at her new rival. Vale was trying to figure out how to snag the holy sword, and she realized that if they get married, she officially gets a share of everything he owns. To a dragon, a human life is over in a heartbeat, and if she marries him, she'll be eating 5-star meals every single day. She straight up asked him to marry her, but Keaton rejected her on the spot, leaving her totally stunned since he already has plenty of girls. Vale is totally clueless because she thinks it's just normal for a strong guy to have a bunch of girls, so she's already calling him master. Keaton shut her down by saying he wasn't her master, and that he's strictly a one-girl guy, leaving Dragon Shroud totally heartbroken and in tears. She's totally lost and thinks it's either because she's not as strong as the immortal king, or the guy just straight up hates her. Still sobbing, she demanded he marry her, and Keaton finally agreed just to get her to stop crying. Vale's screaming with joy while Platy is totally shocked, and after the guy apologizes to his brother, the prince points out that every girl dad in the world is basically the same. The girls are being super annoying, and Platy is totally losing her cool over her brother and his new friend's behavior. The newlyweds are taking a chill stroll along the beach. The brother heads back home to break the news to his mom and dad. Now they're just waiting for the family's blessing. The girl is freaking out over Keaton because she knows something is definitely wrong. She actually ran away from her royal life when it got to be too much, and that's when she's having a total blast and loves his cooking so much she wants to stay forever. But she feels like a huge burden since she can never go back to the mermaid kingdom. Keaton just smiled, knowing her situation and deciding to keep their lives exactly the way they are. This kid literally got his powers straight from God. Everyone saw he was totally useless in a fight, so he ended up here. He doesn't even think of himself as some big tough guy. From that day on, he's totally embarrassed but asks her to stay with him, and Platy just stares back with fire in her eyes. She's so hyped that she jumps straight into her future husband's arms, and honestly, they couldn't be happier together. Vale interrupts the boy's hug to complain that he's making her wait, all while still calling him master. She's throwing a total fit on the ground at their feet because she's starving, so Kedan and Platy share a look before the boy decides he's gotta step up and he's giving her a wedding treat. The mermaid is super hyped, and the girl says she's down for whatever as long as he hurries it up. Kedan decided to build a house but knew they couldn't do it alone. Platy held up a starfish thinking that's what he wanted, but she was way off. The boy. Keaton told them they had to deal with the field right now to grab the ripe crops, especially since he was already slammed making miso and soy sauce and taking care of his wife. Keaton announced he wanted to build a house. Plato was stoked, and even the undead king thought it sounded awesome. Just hearing him speak totally freaked out the heroes. They had no clue he was... The kid asked if something bad happened, but the king promised he was totally fine and just stopped by because he had some free time. Keaton finally let out a huge sigh of relief, and that's when the guest handed him another piece of mana metal as a surprise gift. The kid was totally blown away by how massive it was and said it was a huge help. But when the undead asked if he actually needed the rock, he just nodded and said he could make tons of stuff for his house with it. He said it was perfect timing since he was short on workers, and the king was totally confused, asking what he meant by hands. Keaton explained that Platy's brother realized their house was a total dump, so he decided to build something way better and give it everything he's got. Plenty was totally shocked and suggested they just ask the undead king for help. And while Kidda thought the king making miso would be way faster, he quickly realized how dumb that was and dropped the... The undead king asked how many workers he needed, and if he could just bring them all right there. Kadam was totally blown away and asked again thinking he heard wrong, but the undead king just shot back and asked if 10 would even be enough for him. The guy was totally confused and said he'd be grateful, but he had no clue where he'd get that much. Then the undead king just vanished and told him to wait a sec. A little while later, Caden and Platy were totally floored when the king of the undead showed up and introduced 5 orcs and 5 goblins straight from his dungeon. He explained that these monsters were born in his dungeon and follow his every command, so he told them to obey the saint from now on, which completely blew Keaton's mind. Keaton introduces himself and shyly to the monsters, but they just stand there like statues until the undead king explains that they literally can't talk. He explained they're basically mindless drones that only follow orders and don't even care about staying alive, and Keaton totally got the picture. The king said he didn't have to pay them anything, and since they literally eat mana from the air, he wouldn't even have to buy them food, which made Platy super hyped. She hyped everyone up by yelling that Kidden would fix all their problems, but when the guy stayed quiet, Platy had to ask if that was for real. The guy agreed she was totally right. Then he bowed low to the king and thanked him with all his heart. The undead told him it was totally cool, wished him luck with the house, and vanished, leaving the guy clenching his fist in pure determination. He excitedly yelled about teaming up to build a sick house, but the monsters just stood there like statues, making him feel like he was talking to a brick wall. One line out. If the user provided multiple sentences in one line, I provide one line back. Let's try to make it sound more like a recap. Once the foundation was finally set, Plutty was super hyped about the monster's skills, and even Keaton had to admit the house was turning out way bigger than he thought it would be. He says orcs are built for the heavy lifting, and those goblins are actually super skilled with their hands. The guy explained that goblins might mess up the hard stuff at first, but if you're patient and keep teaching them, they actually get better and can even learn how to cut and weave grass. He grinned and said that even though they were monsters watching them work, he really wanted to be kind to them, and Plenty just beamed at her husband's sweet words. She tells him not to feel bad since they're just made of mana and aren't even real. But Kitten just rubs his head and says everyone deserves a fair shot at a good life. Platty explains that magical creatures use these to fight humans, sending in massive armies because they don't care if the monsters die since the dungeon will just spawn more anyway. Kanan was totally shocked, but he realized that monsters were basically running the whole show, from the food they ate to the trash they threw away. He let out a heavy sigh and just accepted that this was his life now. But then he heard the goblin trip and wipe out with all his gear, making Keaton whip around to see what happened. He rushed over to check on him, helping the goblin to his feet and asking over and over if he was actually okay. The goblin just stayed dead silent, and even though Ketten knew they wouldn't react, he started wondering if he even wanted to talk to them anyway. The goblin suddenly speaks up, snapping the kid back to reality, and when he keeps telling Kadan he's totally fine, both the boy and Platty are left completely speechless. The guy drops to one knee to check on him again, and the goblin tells him he's doing just fine. He called Kitten his lord and said he wanted to work even harder, and the goblin right next to him shouted that he was down for it too. Keaton's jaw dropped when the other one started talking, and suddenly, a huge wave of goblins and orcs surrounded them, all begging to join their team. Plotty was totally skeptical, but she said the monsters were actually thinking for themselves now, making the boy scream that they couldn't just wake up like that out of nowhere. He stared at his hands and realized his power was on a whole different level, so he knew he had to be way more careful with how he used it. He balled up his fist and put everything he had into just speaking up. Then he rushed the goblins, gave them a massive hug, and thanked them for real. Everyone figured they'd missed their shot to say no, while the goblins started celebrating by tossing the hero into the air. A while later, the massive house was finally finished, and while everyone was hyped, Grinzel was totally blown away. She asked what went down while she was gone, but Platy just called her a stupid dragon and told everyone to listen up and laugh, bragging with a smug grin that this place was her and her husband's secret love nest. Grinzel bolted inside to explore, and even though Platy tried to stop her, the dragon girl was totally blown away because she'd never seen a building this cool before. Keaton told her to kick off her shoes and put them in a special spot, explaining to a super confused Vale that it was the only way to keep the tatami mats from getting trashed. She thought about it for a sec, kicked off her shoes, and started rolling all over the floor, asking why the mat felt so good, while Plotty just asked if she was staying for good. The guy says it's totally fine since that's exactly why he built such a massive house, but Plotty gets suspicious and asks if monster people are moving in too, and Keaton confirms that's the whole plan. When he told them the news, they thought he was joking because there was no way they had something that awesome. But then they revealed their home was actually an old dungeon, and Keaton knew this was going to be a huge problem for the undead king. He told them they were building a massive house with tons of rooms called an apartment, and before the goblins could even complain, he hyped them up with plans for kitchens and bathrooms that he asked the monsters for backup, and the goblins were so hyped to be included that they all shouted yes at the same time. Platty was totally confused by this invasion because she thought it was just going to be her and Kidan alone in their private love nest. A goblin rushes over and Kidan calls him Gobukichi, and when Platty asks about the weird name, Kidan explains he's actually the best at sewing in the whole group. Gobukichi let him know his order was finished, and Kidan was so stoked that he ran into the room and shouted for joy when he saw it was a real futon. Platty had no clue what a futon was, so Kidan explained it was a special gift he got for his wife. He explained he was growing cotton next to the grass to make tatami mats for a futon in their new place. Then he told her to lay down, and even though she had no idea what, after laying there for a minute, she literally screamed about how comfy it was, and the guy was just hyped that she liked it so much. Keaton sat down and apologized for her having to sleep on the hard floor. But Platty just gave him a really sincere thank you for being so thoughtful. Then she turns to thank Gobukichi too, and the poor guy is so caught off guard that he gets totally flustered. Then the heroes shouted that they'd grind way harder from now on to make their farm life absolutely amazing. Right then, a massive ship came crashing through the waves and headed straight for the shore with the wind howling past it. A bored goblin was sighing while filling his bucket at the shore, but then he spotted a ship on the horizon and stared in total shock, having never seen anything like it before. A bit later at the house, Caden hands Platy's brother a glass of water and asks him if something went down. The guy's jaw hit the floor as he looked around, calling the house absolutely insane and saying the kid must have some kind of god-tier powers, while Kidna just laughed nervously and agreed. They sat face to face as Keaton broke down why today was such a big deal, and Arowana agreed, explaining it was all about the wedding between the young guy and Platy. The kid asks what they talked about, and Arowana says his dad was totally lost at first, but after hearing about the boy's insane power, he finally agreed. Then Arowana drops the bombshell that the kid doesn't actually belong to any race. Keaton was happy to hear it, but he mentioned Platy was super stressed about the political marriage, and when he asked how the people and monsters were doing, Arowana said Platy mentioned their dad's plan to marry his daughter off to a legendary saint, but he wasn't even shocked and just asked if they'd already given up. He said they were totally fuming about losing their shot at marrying Platy, but since other enemies were already hunting her, they decided to just stay out of it. Keaton was just glad things were finally settled, but out of nowhere, Arowana dropped to his knees and slammed his forehead right onto the floor. Kaiden was totally shocked and asked what was up, so Arowana promised to keep the kid out of trouble as long as they looked after Platy for him. Kaiden told Arowana to just chill and get up, admitting he was actually super happy and thankful to be with Platy. He told me he showed up here all alone, and if it wasn't for Platy, he'd still be a total loner who probably would have forgotten his own name just like the King of the Undead. Erwano totally loses it when he hears the name Undead King, but Keaton just chills and explains he's actually talking about his neighbor, an immortal king with the same name. Erwano is standing there with his jaw on the floor, but suddenly, a goblin comes charging at them looking absolutely terrified. He dropped the bombshell that the enemy was launching a massive attack from the coast. A swarm of magical monsters had already landed and were ready for war. The goblin shouted at the orcs and other goblins. Keaton asked if any magical beasts had broken in, but Erwana shut him down, saying it was impossible since this place is a top-secret hideout, leaving him totally stunned. Suddenly, they spotted a ship on the horizon, and Brother Platy was positive it was full of magical creatures, so Kidding asked the orc in front of him if Orkobo was actually doing. The orc steps aside and Keenan spots a demon woman kneeling there, while Orkobo explains her name might be Asterisk the Milky, even though he isn't totally sure. Kidding catches himself staring at the girl, but she totally snaps at him to stop daydreaming and mind his own business, revealing she's actually Astras the Heartless, a literal demon lord. The orcs told the boy they caught her trying to take out their boss. Keaton was totally caught off guard. Then he spotted a massive pile of bones nearby and asked what the deal. He said there were 100 enemies, but they wiped them all out, and Keaton was totally stunned that 10 people actually beat 100. The guy walks up to the monsters and tells them he knows they're strong, but begs them to stop being reckless because he'd be devastated if they died, only for them to say they're. Astris was totally fuming because everyone was acting like she wasn't even there. Arowana walked right up and demanded to know how she even found this secret spot. The demon lord was completely blown. She told him they'd gotten soft and stupid from their easy lives, warning him that demons are way smarter than they look. Then she sliced right through the ropes with her nails and told them they'd never understand her even in a million years as she broke free. Astri stood tall and drew her sword, declaring she was there to take Princess Platy and kill the thief known as the Great Saint. She pointed her blade right at Keaton to show he was the target, and the whole room instantly went on high alert. Arowana says this guy is a top-tier demon lord who's obsessed with blood, and he's such a beast in battle that even his own teammates are shaking in their boots. One line out. Since the input is provided as a single block/paragraph, I should provide a single block/paragraph. Let's try to combine them into a single high. The guy spun around and totally freaked out when he saw the king, but Kidan just grinned and introduced them to each other. Astras and Arowana totally lost it, screaming that this guy was the world's biggest nightmare and they couldn't believe the kid actually knew him. The undead king says he heard the demon is coming to kill Keaton, and the boy confirms it's true, making Astris totally freak out until a weird sound from the sky makes her look up. She spotted a giant dragon in the clouds asking what was going on. Caden walked up to say hi to Griselle, but Astris was completely stunned by his look. Platy hopped off the. She checked if he was doing okay, and after he said he was fine, Arowana asked where she'd been, so Griselle explained they were just up in the mountains hunting for tonkatsu eggs. The ashtrays crashed to the ground, and the dragon explained they only came back because they spotted a demon ship out at sea and got curious. Then asked if this low-level demon was really planning to take Kadan out. She warned them that if they touched her master, they were dead meat. She basically called all demons pathetic worms and promised to end their entire species. Keaton stepped in to stop Vale, he made her a deal. If she promised to stop being their enemy, they'd let her go home, and the whole squad stood right behind. Estra snaps at him to watch his mouth since she's one of the 4 heavenly kings. But even though she's shaking with pure terror, she tries to keep it together so she doesn't embarrass the demon lord. She jumped to her feet, balled her fist, and shouted that she had a better idea. She pointed her sword right at Kadan and challenged him to a duel, saying she'd... Grinzel was totally fuming at the demon's attitude and was ready to roast her on the spot, but Kidden stepped in to stop her. He told everyone straight up that he'd... The boy raises his sword and accepts the demon lord's challenge, and while the woman thinks he's being totally reckless, she still gets into her fighting stance. She looked at him and realized that even with his powerful friends, he was still just a normal guy she could easily snatch. She took a closer look and realized it was the legendary dark sword, Dr. Schwartz, making her drop the blade and pass out cold. Everyone was totally shocked, and while Keaton wondered why she passed out, Grinzel actually suggested burying her to use as fertilizer for the fields until Keaton stepped in to stop the dragon. A little while later, Grinzel is soaring high in the sky, clutching a terrified Astra who's shaking like crazy in her paw. Keaton told her to head home, which she was totally salty about, but the sailors were so freaked out by Vale that they ditched Astras and bolted. The girl finally snapped out of it and asked the dragon why she was even taking orders from that guy. Grinzel just let out a super annoyed sigh and gave her a scary look, telling her she didn't have to explain a single thing. She smirked, thinking the master's food was way too good to share with anyone else, while Astros hovered in her hand, wondering how this guy managed to crush 2 total disasters. A while after everything went down, Keaton, Platy, and Griselle were totally shocked by what they saw. Astras the Heartless and 2 demons were standing right in front of them, and when the boy asked what they were doing there, the goblin guide explained they just wanted to talk. Platy charged straight at Astras, screaming for her to get lost, while Kadan tried to get her to chill and explain what was going on. The 2 demon girls next to her politely asked for a chance to explain that they'd actually been kicked out of the Demon King's army. The heroes were totally shocked and called her a liar, pointing out she was the only one kicked out of the army, so she just ordered the demons to back off. They were shocked she'd even say that after they'd promised to serve her forever, and Grinzel, who was in his human form, was definitely not happy about what he was seeing. She transforms into a dragon and warns everyone to shut up or get toasted, but Keaton shuts her down by saying she's not getting any dinner tonight. The dragon whipped around, sending the terrified demons scrambling behind Astras as the boy asked why he was actually kicked out of the Demon King's army. She hung her head and admitted she totally failed to catch the princess. Her monster squad got crushed, and honestly, that wasn't even the worst part. She warned that letting a dragon go wild on the battlefield was a huge crime. So Kaiden asked what kind of dragon was even out there in the war between humans and demons. He looks over at Vale, who just chills with her hands behind her head and says she was asked to bring her back, making Astras realize that's exactly why she lost her Sky King title. The demon girl next to her whispered that this meeting felt super sus because they rushed the decision while the demon lord was away, almost like they were just trying to get rid of her. Another girl jumped in and said Mr. Riverian is totally behind this because he's always plotting something shady. Astras stopped them right there, saying nobody else was to blame because strength is the only thing that matters in the demon army, so failing the mission was totally on her for being too weak. Keaton finally figured out she was kicked out because of the recent chaos, and the demons were only crying because Astras joined the army. Vale snapped and asked what she wanted, so Platy nervously brought up taking responsibility for her actions. But Astras shut that down, saying she's starting a fresh life and She started explaining that the local orcs and goblins were way stronger than her and could actually talk, which is totally unheard of. And to make things even crazier, Kadan was being worshipped. She balled up her fist and demanded to know why, even dropping to her knees to beg the boy for a job just so she could find out the truth. Vale and Platy were totally stunned, but the guy just calmly said yes, making the girls blow up and say there was no way they'd allow it, while he just shy. He said since she was ditching her old life to start fresh in a new place, he wanted to help her out, but Vale just gave a wicked laugh and promised they'd try to kill him again later. Kidden shot her a confident look and said he was down for the challenge, while the girl realized this was going to be a win for everyone. The demons with Asteris asked to stay too, and Kidden was totally down for it, but he gave them one huge rule: no spilling blood while they're hanging out there. Valley was super annoyed at how clueless the owner was, and Platy just sighed, saying this felt way too much like Kidan. Astris bowed her head in agreement, promising she'd follow. She asked for his order, so a hyped-up Keaton decided to make a request while the demon girls nearby introduced themselves as Batami and Balena. A while later, the demons are out there working the fields, but they're totally confused about why they've been turned into farmers. Kidding wasn't sure they were ready, and almost gave them chores instead, but Astros insisted she could handle it since it wasn't harder than a weapon, while Emmy totally disagreed. She noticed Astris kept digging in the same spot, so Tammy explained it was a hoe for loosening the soil and making garden beds. Astris realized she was totally messing up, and while Astros and Balena are fancy royals with perfectly smooth skin, so she told them to just hand everything over to her. Aster wasn't backing down, insisting she'd serve the great saint no matter what, and Keaton was just hyped to see these demons working so hard. Next, he sends Batemi and the goblins to prep the garden beds, and once they're on board, he tells Astros and Baleen to plant seeds every 30 centimeters. They got back to the grind after a bit, with Astris and Balena burying the plants while Batemi worked on softening the dirt. Esther winced as her back started killing her, making it impossible for her to even stand up straight. Balena didn't realize the job would be this tough and let out a sharp scream, so when Astros asked what was wrong, she told him something was actually wriggling around in the dirt. Aster's back snapped with a sickening crack, making everyone scream from the pain and the gross ground, while Kaiden watched and realized this was getting way too intense. A bit later, Astros caught up with the orcs and goblins, laughing that since the hunt was moving further out, she could finally show everyone who she really was. She asked Platy what they were hunting, and the girl targeted a square boar because Keaton really needed to restock his meat stash. Asteris begged for this mission because she really wanted to make up for her performance out in the field. Suddenly, they heard footsteps and looked straight ahead. The noise was coming from the deepest part of the woods. Everyone just froze, waiting to see what would happen next. A pack of square boars suddenly charged right at them, and Astros screamed for Balena and Batemi to get ready for a fight. Suddenly, something zoomed right past Astros' face. It was a whole pack of orcs and goblins. They started wiping out those boars with lightning-fast axe swings. The whole flock got wiped out in a flash, and those monster guys didn't even make a sound because they were totally used to it by now. Astros was totally shocked by their insane power. But Balena just pointed at their tools and showed him that every single axe and sickle was actually made of mana metal. Plotty sighed at how crazy it was that all their gear was made of pure mana metal, leaving the demons totally stunned since finding metal that high quality is basically impossible. Batemi finally figured out why they were so overpowered, but Astris told her she was dead wrong. She told them these guys were total beasts even without weapons when they first met, and Balena and Batemi were completely blown away. Platy mentioned her hoe was also made of mana metal, making Astris shiver as she realized the real problem wasn't the weapon, but the fact that they had no idea how to use it. She screamed that they couldn't just stand around anymore and that it was finally time for them to join the hunt. A bit later, the whole pack of boars was totally wiped out. Platy thanked the squad for all their hard work. Even though Astris was beat up and gasping for air, she didn't expect these mountain boars to be such a challenge, but Platy just licked her lips, rolled up her sleeves, and said it was time to start butchering. She walked over to the bodies and started prepping them, saying they were way too heavy to carry whole, so she was gonna chop them up and freeze the pieces. A bit later, Kaden is back at home in the kitchen, cooking up some soup and giving it a quick taste test. Platy shouted that they were finally back, and the guy turned around with a huge grin, saying they showed up at the perfect moment. He poked his head out of the kitchen to say dinner was ready, but once he saw those dark demons, he asked what the heck was going on, and Platy told him their day had gone totally wrong. Looking totally defeated, Astris admitted she was actually one of the legendary 4 heavenly kings that everyone was terrified of, but she ended up here after losing her title to these locals who are way too. Just as she felt completely useless, Kitten shut that down and totally shocked her by explaining that her real power wasn't about her own strength, but the loyal friends like Padamim and Baal. Annie says this means she's got a special power called charisma, so if she just starts believing in herself, she's gonna open up all kinds of new paths. The girls shared a look and grinned, clenching their fists because they were totally hyped and ready to go. Kidan finally announces it's time to eat, which makes Vale super hyped, and since the weather is perfect, they take all that delicious-looking food outside to enjoy a feast in the yard. Aster and Vale were totally lost looking at the food, so Keaton explained it was actually grilled ginger boar and a hot bowl of tanjiro soup. The girls weren't buying the story and were super nervous to grab the plates, but as soon as Astris took a bite, she started crying because it was so good, which totally freaked Keaton out. Plotty and Vale were absolutely loving it, basically inhaling their food, and Kaiden was so stoked to see them happy that he told them to eat their fill and get ready to do it all again tomorrow. A while back, Astris was lugging around some food and noticed Keaton and Plotty were nowhere to be found, but Belena told her they were just out at sea handling some business. Astris finished picking the veggies and asked what was next, so Belena told her it was time to pull some weeds and get the house cleaned up. Vale ordered Asteris to get to work in the fields while she just chilled on the porch, telling him straight up that if he doesn't plow, he's gonna starve. Temmie asked where she fit into the plan, but Vale totally lost it and demanded to know what that low-ranked demon was muttering about. She let out a sigh and said she was staying to watch the house, and while Tammy and Belena were totally bummed, they didn't fight it and yelled that they'd guard the place until Keaton finally showed up. Down by the shore, Platty's legs turned back into a tail the second she hit the water, and she told Kaiden that she just has to switch back to this form every now and then. He asks if living in the sea is way easier than being on land, and she just stares right at him. She acted super confident and said it's the same deal everywhere, since her human disguise is basically top tier. Living on land is just way easier for her, and even though Kido knew she was totally faking it, he smiled because he liked how she played it cool. He asked what she really wanted. She says there are dungeons and caves hidden in the mountains and the ocean where monsters crawl out, but Keaton just wants to know if things like fish fertilizer and starfish count as monsters too. Platty nodded and told him some were actually helpful while others were just trash. But then she dropped a bomb about another one of the ocean's top 5 monsters being nearby, and Kiden's face completely dropped. Platty bragged that this enemy was going to be a total piece of cake. He told her there was no way he'd let her go alone, but he was worried about how he'd... She hands it over and tells him to keep chewing so he can breathe, but Platty warns him not to swallow it yet because if he stops chewing, he'll lose his air. Keaton gulped it down and said he got it, but the girl just froze and asked why he'd do that before handing him another one and telling him to swim after her. He dives underwater and tries to take a breath, and he's totally shocked when it actually works. Suddenly, he spots Platty waving him over with a huge smile, and man, she looks absolutely stunning. She spent so much time on land that Keaton totally forgot she was a mermaid. But as he swam after her, he felt so hyped that such a beautiful princess was actually his wife. Kitten's face turned bright red, making the girl ask if he was even breathing or chewing his food, but he just waved his hands and insisted he was totally fine. Pleiades sensed something and whipped around, realizing the salt and minerals nearby were actually giving off a super creepy evil energy. Just as Keaton started wondering what was out there, a massive fish with glowing eyes suddenly appeared right in front of the heroes. Plotty screamed that it was the spotted moray eel, and with a massive roar, the fish lunged straight at the heroes and totally freaked Kadan out. She screamed that she wasn't letting her move an inch and told the guy to finish the job as she hurled her potion flasks. They slammed right into a spotted moray eel, making it burst into flames and scream, while the guy stood there totally shocked by the underwater fire and how awesome his wife was. He whipped out his sword and swung it with everything he had, slicing that spotted eel clean in half right in front of them. Platty bragged that her husband was the strongest guy ever, leaving the... Kaiden finally spotted them and started waving his hands, while Platty said the mess was fixed and they could finally head home. He grabbed everyone's attention and signaled that he wasn't finished yet. Then he suddenly dove straight for the bottom. He starts hacking at the base of the seaweed with his sword, and even though Plenty thinks it's a total waste of time since the plants are useless for magic, they're growing. She asked what he was planning, and he just gave her a creepy grin as they floated to the surface. But once they hit the shore, he started slicing them up while humming about how good they'd taste. They were cooking in a pot right on the rocks, and Kitten explained the seaweed was basically wakame and wanted to toss it in with that moray eel. But Platty was like, "Are you?" Keenan's down to give it a shot, so he grabs the plate and says it just needs a little salt and pepper to finish off this crazy moray eel and seaweed soup from another world. Platty wasn't so sure about the food at first, but after one bite, her face totally lit up because it tasted amazing. She was totally shocked that this trash ingredient tasted so crunchy and delicious, and Kitten was just hyped she liked it, since it's always great when something useless actually turns out to be a win. He realized it'd take a ton of salt to get all that nasty slime off, so he was ready to just leave the eel and head home until Platty offered to help him out. She said the flavor would blow everyone away, and her respect for her husband hit a whole new level as they finished the dish. The guy got super flustered and asked again, but Platty told him to quit doubting, while Kidan made sure to give credit to everyone who helped him out. Platty was totally shocked, but the guy reminded her that since they moved in together, all the new neighbors had made the place way too loud and busy. He's finally starting to see why having backup is so important. And while Platty was feeling hyped by the speech, the guy said he'd realized something else too. He told her they needed to spend way more time together, and while she was totally shocked, Kidan reminded her that they were literally newlyweds. Plotty turned bright red, and when the hero asked her to come back for a private swim just for the two of them, she totally agreed. She mentioned she had to whip up a new way for him to breathe underwater so he could talk too, and the guy just nodded along. Meanwhile, at the demon castle, the news just dropped that Astrus the Heartless was officially kicked out and banished, and now everyone's already buzzing about the meeting to pick the next king. The guy cuts them off and asks who gave them the right to kick Astrus out, but they just snap back that she's seriously messed up. This gloomy guy calls him Reverian the Poor and tells him to stop playing the victim since he's the one who caused this mess. The guy jumps up, draws his sword, and holds the blade right against Reverian's neck, calling him a total traitor. Reveri started shaking like crazy and begged for mercy, calling the guy with the sword the demon lord Xaden. Zidane told Reverian to clean up this disaster before he got back, or at least fix it enough to take the blame for it. Reverian bows his head as another guy steps up, handing him a note and telling him these are the coordinates. Zidane said he got it, but he couldn't stop thinking about Kidan, knowing that even a demon lord will totally snap if you push them too far. Rewinding a bit to the other summoned heroes, we meet Momoko Akasaka, a girl who seemed totally ordinary. Well, at least she did back then. She's right in the middle of taking on a massive army of monsters with her level 2 Divine Scythe spell. She let out one massive swing that shattered the earth all the way to the monsters, wiping them all out as they fell into the wreckage. Momoko gets summoned to a whole new world with a power called Divine Side Level 2, and now she's out there hunting demons to save humanity. Adjusting to this world was a total nightmare for her because there was zero tech, the food was trash, the bread was hard enough to kill someone, and her itchy clothes and bed were driving her crazy. Most of the summoned couldn't handle the pressure and died, and even though 10 people were still around when Momoko arrived, she's wondering how many are actually left. She thought he was finally out of the way, especially since he turned out to be a total weakling with zero skills. In this brutal world, you're basically toast without skills. But Momoko Akasaka is built different, because she's got an insane power that the king totally obsesses over, so that's why she's out there fighting alone, using one of the most broken skills in the world to slice through every monster in her way. They just keep coming, and this demon army is so massive that no matter where you look, it's nothing but monsters. She stares them down, knowing this is the front line, and she refuses to lose because she's going to protect this world no matter what. Just then, a massive dragon flies right over the girl battling the Demon King's army, making everyone freeze in terror as Momoko Akasaka screams that it's a dragon without even looking. He's a total curse on the world that you can't stop staring at, even though looking his way means you're dead, and since even the other monsters think he's a... Not even Momoko and her broken one-hit kill skill could take this monster down, and everyone else was screaming to run before its breath wiped them all out. Everyone was freaking out, wondering if this dragon was about to end them all as it finally touched down. Then he spoke up, ordering everyone to listen like they were way below him, and the whole crowd was stunned because they had no idea dragons could actually talk. She introduced herself as Grinzelvale, the daughter of the legendary Dragon King Grazer, and said her master ordered her to bring back the total loser he'd just kicked to the curb. Astrus the Heartless crashed down right in front of the crowd, and the second the demons saw her, they started yelling for everyone to grab her fast. Vale revealed that Astrus was totally supposed to die until the master stepped in, so now everyone needs to shut up and listen to every single word. She warned everyone that whether they're demons or humans, if they disrespect her master, she'll burn their whole city to the ground, and she proved it by spitting a massive blast of fire that humans and demons were crashing to the ground as the magic surged everywhere, and Momoko was totally shocked by how insane this power felt. Vale told everyone that Saint Coden is her master, and warned them to never forget it, because if you're his enemy, you're her enemy too, and then she just blasted off. The crowd sitting on the ground started whispering Saint Quidon's name, totally shocked that even a dragon would obey him, but the crazy part was that nobody actually knew who he was. Back at the house, Keaton and Platty have built a ton of buildings and massive farms, and Keaton is just chilling, enjoying a delicious meal with a huge smile on his face. He stood up and stretched while looking at the mountains, ready for another day of farm work, when suddenly he heard someone coming and whipped around. A voice suddenly asks if he's Saint Kitten, and when the shocked boy says yes and asks who he is, the man reveals he's the demon lord Xaden, leaving Kid. Tammy and Belena shouted over to Kaden, totally hyped because they finally pulled it off. They lugged the animal's body on a stick, shouting that Mrs. Astrus finally nabbed her prey after working super hard. Her face totally shifted the second Zidane said her name, and she looked up, completely shocked to see him there. The demon lord is shocked she's actually there, while she looks at him totally confused. She asks how he even found her, and he tells her that her own crew left a secret. Butemi and Belena were loving every second of this while Astros just stood there wondering why he even showed up. but then the demon lord told her he was only there to see her, making the Astra admitted she totally failed the mission, so she was officially kicked out of the Four Kings, and was now completely useless to him. She mentioned Xaden always looked out for her, but she didn't want people judging her later, so the demon lord got all hyped up and told her he didn't care what anyone thought because she was his top priority. The woman turned bright red, Platy was completely stunned, and Vale was honestly just sick of all the drama. Once they finally got inside, Kidan fixed everyone some hot tea while Zidane apologized for being such a massive burden just by being there. He introduces himself as Xaden, the big boss of all demons, so Keaton asks if that makes him the king of the demon land, and after the guy nods, the hero asks if leaving his country. He explained that the demon lord's main job is actually protecting the country from humans. The previous lord was the one who gave him this huge mission. Now, he spends every single day fighting. Keaton says he gets it, but Plates points out that when you're always fighting, there's usually nobody waiting for you at home, which is why Zidane is so glad he has Asteris. She's super reliable, totally capable, and he could never replace her. She got all flustered and said she didn't deserve the hype, which her team absolutely loved seeing. Kadeen swore he'd never kick Astris out, and Zidane backed him up, revealing that Astris was totally backstabbed and banished by a military court while he was busy leading the charge. Zidane said Astris took the heat for that dragon showing up and wrecking the battlefield, but while Vale just hummed a tune like it was nothing, Caden stayed totally silent and lost in his own head. The guy said Astris was gone when he finally got back, so Kadan figured out he was actually there to look for her. Zidane grabbed Astros's hand and told her how stoked he was to see her, because he'd be totally lost without her and seriously thought she was gone for good. Plotty teased that their love was super obvious, making her blush hard as she insisted they were just childhood friends. She also said they were a lost cause because a leader has to look after everyone, and honestly, this country wasn't even worth saving. Rinsel Vale was totally losing her mind and finally screamed at everyone to shut up. She yelled that she didn't care if he was the master or not, he could just take Astris and get out of there. Zidane was just confused and asked who she even was, while poor Astris was absolutely terrified. She reveals that the dragon crashing the fight is Grinzel Vale, and she looks at those demons like they're total trash. Xaden was totally losing it, staring at the girl and saying there's no way this is real, while Vale snapped that she was just there to drop off Astris and hated working her wings off for some rude brat at her master's door. Kieran snapped at Vale because he was super annoyed, so she promised to stay quiet while Zidane just stood there looking totally clueless. He turned to Katadan and warned him that Astros was stuck with a super dangerous crew who basically owned her life. But then the demon lord squeezed his fist and promised he'd get her back no matter what it took. He stood up and straight up demanded a fight, which totally caught Kadan off guard. But the guy insisted he had to prove his title by showing everyone his true fighting spirit. The hero tried to deny it, but Platy shut him down instantly, bragging that her husband is the master of Vale, a literal world-ending disaster, and that an undead king is lurking there too. She asked if he'd heard the news and told him he stood no chance, so Zidane asked Astris if it was for real, and after Astris confirmed it, he admitted she belongs to nobody but herself and is free to leave with Zidane. The hero says she only looked for him to find her purpose, but since someone else is worried sick and wants her back, she should probably focus on them instead. He asked for her answer and reminded her about Xaden's feelings, so she'd give it a shot, making her blush while her crew celebrated, and Vale got excited that she could finally head out. Asteris squeezed his hand and promised to follow him anywhere, from the heat of battle to the afterlife itself, just so she could stay right by his side. Xaden agreed and told her to come back home and never leave his side, and she was totally hyped about it. Her crew was hyped that their boss finally had a title and wasn't a loser anymore. Vale was stoked, and Caden actually started tearing up. Platy jumped up from the couch and shouted for them to knock it off, making everyone stare at her in total confusion. Kin asked what the deal was, and the girl told him straight up that the demon lord was way too naive. Woodlouse is actually pretty smart and started acting like this guy was her future husband, so when Zidane asked who she was, Platy revealed she's the mermaid princess. She dropped a total bombshell, saying the demon nobles were forcing her to marry Xaden, and the demon lord was absolutely floored. He jumped to his feet and demanded to know who came up. The guy sat right next to Astris and swore there was nothing going on between him and Platy, while Kadad just nodded like he totally got it. He explained that whoever marries the mermaid princess gets all their resources too, and Platy just nodded along. She repeated the demon's offer to join forces and marry the princess to their king, which totally blew the minds of Asteris's subordinates. Platy points out that the demon lord is totally clueless about his own marriage and his best ally getting kicked out, which means one of his own guys is definitely planning a backstab. Every demon knew right away it had to be Riverian, especially since Plotty revealed that after she married Keaton, he sent Astris to hunt her down, only to take Astris out himself once the mission failed just to get a massive power boost. Zidane realized that going back to Astris was totally pointless until he finished this guy off, because otherwise, everyone would just keep bringing up her failure. Everyone was saying he'd lose his followers or even get kicked off the throne, and while Keaton was shocked, he honestly didn't care at all. The hero apologized because the guy was actually being for real, and he couldn't stand the thought of some total jerk ruling the demon land. Zidane and Astris were totally blown away by the hero's words, but Plotty stepped in and said she could fix everything by having the demon lord and Astris return home as husband and wife instead of just boss and servant. She suddenly asks to get married right then and there, leaving the demons totally stunned and completely lost. Timmy and Belina were losing their minds with joy that the demon lord and Lady Astris were actually getting married. But Zidane was totally blindsided and unsure about the news, so Plotty asked him if he had some kind of problem with it. Astris turned bright red and shouted no way, but Plotty told her to chill, explaining that her becoming queen would be the ultimate nightmare for the villains trying to take her down. She told them the fastest way to get power was to marry their daughter or sister to the Lord, and Kidding just nodded like he totally got the idea. He explained that if Zidane and Astris got married, the bad guys would be left with nothing, and she confirmed that was the plan, making a super embarrassed Astris really want to speak up and stop them. The lady shot her a death stare, so the woman asked what her deal would be if they actually got married, and the girl just smirked, saying that was a great question. She told them that to get married, they had to make a promise right in front of God. Zayden and Astros grabbed each other's hands and started thinking about that vow. The demon minions were... Plotty was super hyped to explain that if they just made their vows in front of God, their marriage would be totally official, and no one could ever challenge it. He suddenly remembers that in his past life, you had to go to a local office and sign a bunch of forms just to get officially married. He still wanted to know exactly how this oath worked, and Plotty loved the question, telling him it was finally time to find out. Suddenly, the undead king pops up asking why he was summoned, and Zidane is completely floored that a literal immortal king actually showed up. He confirmed the rumors are 100% real, and the saint actually controls 2 world disasters, which totally annoyed Vale since he's heard that a million times already. Zayden took one look at the veil and realized the kid was actually a dragon. Astris backed him up, and Kadan demanded to know why Plotty summoned the undead king. She flashed a smirk and told him he'd be watching their wedding, leaving Zayden and Astra absolutely stunned. Plotty explains the undead king was actually a high priest, so God would be watching them trade vows, which makes Keaton think back to how weddings worked in his own world. Plotty hyped up and asked the skeleton king for his take, and he revealed that Zayden and Astris are actually demons, and even though he's undead now, he used to serve the humans back in the day. The girl started shaking and dropped to her knees, crying that she'd made a huge mistake, while Keaton was totally confused and asked her what was going on. Plotty explains that every race follows their own god, like humans with Zeus, mermaids with Poseidon, and demons with Hades, so basically everyone has their own divine boss. He had no clue what she was talking about and thought her idea made 0 sense. The girl started screaming at the top of her lungs about what she'd done, but the undead king just told her, check. No line breaks, no prefixes. Simple words. Accurate facts. One more check on religions differ. The original has a typo, religion. She looks over at Zayden and Astris to see if they're cool with the plan, and the lady tells her it's no problem at all while giving her a huge thanks. The undead king reached out his hand and said it was time to start, casting a spell for growth while Temmie and Belina panicked, and Kadan and Vale stayed on high alert. The king kept his spell going, shouting that he was pulling them into his world and sharing the Mother Goddess's blessing to turn the whole place into a safe sanctuary that could be purified however they wanted. The noise gets way louder as the undead king screams and throws his hand up, summoning a massive magic circle in the sky that sends lightning crashing down. Astris and Zidane looked around as Kadan asked what was up, and Plotty explained it was the undead king's prayer, making the air feel like it was crushing them. Suddenly, they spot something moving behind those massive wind gusts, and all lock their eyes on it. Right in the middle of that magic seal, a massive guy with a crown and a cloak suddenly appears in the sky holding a staff. Aster knew right away that this was the god of the underworld. Hades and Keaton totally lost it and started screaming in shock. The undead king was actually surprised, calmly admitting he went way too far and accidentally summoned a literal god, leaving Plotty totally stunned that anyone could pull off something that crazy. He was just trying to set up a holy spot for a ceremony, so a god showing up was totally weird. But Plotty screamed that none of that mattered, and asked what they were supposed to do now. Hades finally speaks up, complaining that nobody has summoned him in years and asking why he's even there. which has Temmie and Belena shaking in their boots because they think Zeus's kids just started the final war. Xaden dropped to one knee and told him he was wrong, explaining that while the war was going back and forth, the demons were staying alert, and Hades was totally safe. So the god of the underworld asked why he'd even been called there. Xaden apologized and introduced himself as a demon lord, which totally shocked Kidan since he was talking to a literal god, and then the guy bowed his head and explained he just wanted to marry the girl of his dreams. They set up a wedding and prayed for a blessing from the god of the underworld, but they totally messed up and summoned him right there in person. Even the king of the undead felt bad and Xaden apologized for the interruption. But once Hades heard the immortal king was the one who summoned him, he wasn't surprised at all. He finally agreed, but with a huge catch. Zidane can't have any other wives, so he asks the bowing lord if he's ready to promise his heart to just one woman for the rest of his life. Zidane said that's exactly what he wanted, and then the demon lord promised he'd only ever marry Asteris and stay by her side forever. Hades loved that answer, so he reached out his hand and told him he was getting a special blessing. Once the storm cleared and the underworld god vanished, Xaden stood back up and grabbed Astros's hand. He realized Hades wasn't actually a bad dude, but everyone was super annoyed because he was shouting so loud her ears were ringing, so the king of the undead promised to keep it down next time he prayed. Pleiade rushed over to the demons, totally hyped that they got a direct blessing from God since it's the ultimate power-up from heaven. The king of the undead wished for everyone to stay healthy and have safe births, but he promised that anyone trying to tear them apart would get hit with a massive divine curse. Temmie and Belena were hyped, they pulled it off, and Zidane told them that for demons, this was the ultimate way to show his love for Astris, while Kaiden realized that making... The demon lord turned to Kaiden and Pleiade and told them he owed them big time, because they finally made his dream of marrying Astris come true right when he was about to give up. Astris was literally crying tears of joy as she promised to never forget their help, while Kidan played it off like it was nothing, even though he was secretly super hyped for her. Astris was totally blushing, so Zidane asked if they should head back right now to tell everyone she was officially their new queen. She told Xaden she wasn't going anywhere just yet, leaving both Xaden and Kaiden completely stunned by her choice. Grinzelvale was totally fed up and told the lady to get lost, but she snapped back that they were already married and should just head home, while Kidan shouted for her to wait. He finally asked Astros why she really wanted to stick around, while Zidane just stared at her, looking totally confused. She told them Cadence's lessons totally changed her, and looking right at Xaden, she said she wanted to keep going so she could finally be the perfect wife for him. The guy was totally shocked, but he figured she had her reasons, so he turned to Kaiden and asked him to keep an eye on Astra for a bit longer, while Temmie and Belena watched them. Kaiden says he's totally down with them staying, which completely shocks Vale since she wanted them gone just so she wouldn't have to share her food, and he even admits he'd feel super awkward splitting up a pair of newlyweds when he doesn't even know how to help anyway. Zidane then asks if he can crash at their place for a bit, which totally shocks Astras and leaves Kaiden super confused. He asked if this would cause any real damage, while Pleiade and Vile just stood there looking totally lost, and since he didn't even care if it messed with the demons, the Demon Lord. He said that since the dragon caused total chaos for both sides, the troops weren't moving an inch while they tried to figure out what was going on. Kaiden yelled that he totally got it while Vale was fuming about being blamed, so when Zidane asked if they could stay, Kaiden told them to make themselves at home while realizing they'd eventually need to build their own house. She asked if they'd totally lost it, reminding them there's a traitor in the group, and they're just gonna ditch him. They realized that without them, he'd just keep up with his evil schemes, and when asked if they really wanted that, Pleiade, Kaiden, and Astros' crew actually stopped to think. Zidane just smirked and told them not to sweat it because he'd already handled everything. He let out a wicked laugh while Kaiden hyped him up for being such a legendary demon lord, but she pointed right at Xaden and called him out for being super weird since there wasn't even a ship nearby, and now Pleiade and Kaiden were dying to know how he actually got there. The guy explained that they were using teleportation magic to get around. As long as you have the coordinates, you can zip anywhere in a split second. Kaiden was super hyped because this magic. Zidane then looked right at Belena, making her shake with fear, and reminded her that she's one of the rare spatial demons after all. She left a note with her coordinates before heading out, letting the Demon Lord teleport straight to her. Temmie gives Belena a big hug and tells her she's doing great, making her totally blush. But Belena admits she's super worried that some secret plot is going to force them apart. The Demon Lord thanked Belena for the assist, but Vale was totally fuming and swore she'd never forgive her. Pleiade jumped in and warned them that even though she hated to say it, other types of teleportation magic actually existed, making the girl ask if enemies would show up. But Xaden just, "This place is hidden behind a secret code, and without the key from the person who set it up, Those coordinates are totally worthless. The Demon Lord explained that this place was totally invisible to everyone else, leaving Keaton and Whale completely stunned. Zidane explains that the demons are combining space magic and clairvoyance, letting their mages spy on any location from super far away. But this whole place is actually covered in a shield that kills magic, and the heroes were totally caught off guard by the news. Zidane admitted teleporting was a huge gamble, but Balin helped him track them down, while Tammy gave a quick signal that she was doing just fine. The Demon Lord was sure they'd never find this place or even know where to look, but he didn't say a word to show he understood. The kid asked who used that awesome magic, making Vale pout her cheeks. But then the Skeleton King said only a dragon could pull that off, and suddenly everyone was staring right at her. The dragon girl admitted she was busted, and confessed that after ditching Astros on the battlefield, she came back to trap the whole area inside a massive barrier. Vale was still super mad that Astros stopped her from eating more, making Belena totally terrified. But then Kidden knelt down and told Vale he was really thankful she'd been so worried about him. The dragon basically said it was obvious since she's the only one who has to eat all her master's cooking. But with all these freeloaders showing up, Balan said she hated them all over some food drama, and Timmy and Astros just nodded along. Caden reached out to pet her hair, telling her she was the best for always having his. Keaton shouted that it's time for a massive party to celebrate Astros and Zidane's wedding, and to finally reward Vale for all her hard work. The Undead King was super hyped to join the fun, so Kedan gave him a big smile and said yes while Zidane and Astros thanked him for the help. A bit later they set up a massive feast outside, and Keaton gave a big shout out to the Demon Lord and Asteris for their wedding. Zidane finally tried the food for the first time, making Astros super hyped while Batemi and Belena just beamed with joy. The Demon Lord was totally blown away by the flavor, admitting he'd never eaten anything that good before, and while Kedan was just hyped he liked it. He brought out a massive plate of meat for Vale, who was already ready to dig in with 2 spoons in her hands. She took one bite, snapped her eyes open, and literally turned into a dragon screaming about how tasty it was with fire breath, so Kedan had to tell her to stop transforming and burning. She shifted back into a human, swearing she'd never tasted meat that good, leaving Zidane totally stunned she was a real dragon while Kedan just stood there smiling. He told her it was Kurosaki deer meat Asterisk caught that very day, and she definitely didn't see that coming. He explained how he sliced the meat and used magic spices, but Kedan realized he didn't do it alone, and Vale was totally blown away. Then she starts laughing like a total villain, bragging that everyone is just trash meant to serve her and her master. So Platy snaps and says she's gonna wreck her, but Astra's just Kidding laughed it off, saying Vale really pulled her weight despite the attitude, but Platy reminded everyone her personality still needs a serious upgrade. The girl took a bite and realized Vale was totally right. Her husband's cooking was so good it had to stay a secret, and Zidane even said you wouldn't find food this amazing in a royal palace. He nodded, finally getting why the dragon kept this place a secret, while Astris started looking super worried about something. Pletty asks Caden how he got so good at cooking, but Caden is just surprised, saying he only learned because he lives alone and had to survive. He says his special skill lets him recreate food from his old world, and he's totally convinced it makes his cooking taste even better. He hands the plate over to the Undead King and tells him he's just stoked they actually liked the food. Right then, Astra walks up and asks if his cooking is some kind of classified state secret. Vale claims it's a massive state secret, but Kedan shuts him down and says it's not a secret at all. The woman knelt down to face the boy, and he was totally stunned, asking her what just went down. Astris decided to ask him one more time, begging to work for him so he could teach her how to be the perfect wife, leaving Kedan and the whole crew absolutely stunned. Do it. Wait. Veiled chuckled, usually implies a veil or hiding the face. Giggled behind her hand is a common anime trope translation. Plotty got super annoyed and pouted, complaining that she's only good for hand chops. But Keaton stepped in to tell her she's actually awesome at way more than that. He told her she's the only reason he even bothers farming and cooking such fire food, and Plotty was so hyped she just stared at him with total hard eyes. Kitten turned to the Demon Queen Astras and told her straight up that Koku should be the one watching over her. She turned them down, saying she had to crush every challenge on her own to be the perfect wife for the Demon Lord, and Batemi and Belena were totally hyped for her. Kedan smiled at how real she was being, but then Zidane suddenly turned to him and asked if he could join the training, which totally caught Kedan by surprise. The guy asked if he was down for wedding training and Zidane agreed and told him the place is actually super wild. From the kitchen to the way they grow food for their buildings, he thinks this place is amazing and totally gets why Astros wants to study here. He wants to give her that same support back, just like her husband does. He even talks about how a husband and wife should always have each other's backs, just like Keaton. He was totally hyped to hear that, and Platy said it made sense since he wasn't like those lazy kings who just sit around looking pretty in their castles. Zidane told St. Kaiden one more time that he was banking on him, and Asteris was right there to back him up. A bit later, the orcs and goblins are busy building a new base, and Zidane is right there helping out when he asks Keaton how he's doing, and the guy says he's feeling awesome. He bragged about being a total pro with his hands and said he really appreciated the chance, but right then, Astros called out to him. She showed up in an apron and mittens with a massive spread of food, making Zidane turn bright red, and even though Astros was totally confused by his reaction, Zidane just played it cool while secretly feeling like he was in heaven. Our hero sits back down at the massive outdoor feast, where Keaton is raving about the flavor, Vale is speed-eating to show support, and Platy is hyping up Astros while noticing the Demon King is literally crying because the food is so good. He asked what the meal was. Asteris told him it was Nikujaba, and Zayden's jaw dropped when Kadan revealed she actually cooked the whole thing herself. He told her that since she's a swordsman, she's already a pro with a knife, so she just needs to learn the ingredients and the cooking steps, or she can just leave. But Tammy and Belena helped her up, and after thanking them, she immediately started wondering what else she needed for the engagement. Amy's like, "Duh, it's obviously clothes," and tells them they've got to learn to sew. But then she notices the Demon King is just wearing a regular shirt. Batemio was caught off guard by Keaton's move, but he agreed and said that being a guy makes him the perfect person to design clothes for other dudes. He already promised to make Platy some new clothes, but he's totally stuck and can't think of a single design. He said he already had the fabric, grabbed it off the table, and told them to just hang on for a bit. Keaton brought out 3 rolls of fabric and said it was all he had, but she was totally blown away and hyped because she'd never seen anything so beautiful in her life. This dude told them about the time he explored a mountain dungeon and found a caterpillar that shoots out threads. He brought a few of them home as a test and built special cages for them, which totally caught Platy off guard. Keaton explained how he turned caterpillars into this crazy fabric, and everyone was just standing there with their jaws on the floor. Temmie stared at the fabric in total shock because it was literally made from caterpillar poop. But Belena just shrugged since his ideas were always way ahead of their time. But Temmie's eyes totally lit up as she realized it was actually okay to make girls' clothes out of caterpillar silk. Keating asks if she can pull it off, and she's totally down, saying she grew up in her parents' fabric shop and knows exactly what to do. Asteris was totally shocked since she had no clue what was happening, and while Belena thought it was awesome, Temmie begged to have it until Kadan called her his literal savior, so Asteris jumped in to help too since she needed the training anyway. But Temmie decided she'd start by making Miss Platy some new clothes, and the girl was totally down, smiling because she couldn't wait to see what they'd create. But Temmie pulled out a rope and said that once things settled down, they'd start by measuring it. She yanked the rope with a super creepy smile. Platy was totally confused by. She knew Platy was getting clothes first, but since she's making outfits for the whole squad, she asked to measure everyone, and Platy straight up asked how they should strip down for her. With a quick flick of her hand, she made Patami scream and turn bright red as she asked if Platy was really going commando. But Platy just looked confused and asked what. She suddenly remembered her husband made that exact same face when they first met, since Asteris had to explain that as a mermaid, she had no idea she actually needed to wear pants. Platy asks if there's a problem, and Batamia is totally shocked he even has to ask because, yeah, there definitely is. Astros explains that for both the demons and the humans on the surface, showing your lower half in public is actually a crime. Plenty freaked out and screamed about why no one warned her, but Asteris just said they never thought she'd actually walk like that. Suddenly, the mermaid princess remembered seeing her brother putting on these weird things, and she told me they're called underwear. Platy basically decided that lingerie is official formal wear for big meetings, but Tammy realized she actually wasn't joking. She got super hyped and asked to take over everything, promising to show her why these clothes were actually awesome, and even though Plenty was a bit lost, she told her she was putting all her trust in her. The girl began taking measurements, and Batemi asked Petty if she was pulling in her stomach, which made Petty blush. Petty said she'd never been this upset about her husband's eating before, and Batemi just said that was totally normal. The girl kept measuring everyone and shouted that Astros's belly was way bigger than she expected, but when Belena joked it was just the power of love, a super embarrassed Astros told her to shut up while Vela just wondered what these annoying pests were even doing. Finally, the work was finished, and Butemi hyped up the dress, shouting that the blue ruffles looked just like ocean waves and were perfect for a mermaid princess like Platy. Kitten and Zidane were totally vibing with it, so Batemi asked Platy if she liked it too. She said it was super unique and she was really happy, and when Platy walks over and Kaden tells her she looks awesome, but then she mentions Batemi made her some underwear too. Kaden gets totally flustered, so Platy asks if that's The mermaid princess said it was totally fine since it was awesome when her brother did it, so Keaton decided he'd definitely step up for his brother-in-law next time. Vale kept staring at Plotty's clothes in a super weird way. Then she suddenly sparked a fireball and chucked it right at her. The girl screams her head off while staring at the ball, and Kidan thinks she's just being jealous, but Vale tells him to shut up and pay attention. The flames died down and the dress didn't have a single scratch, leaving the mermaid princess totally confused. She poked at the fabric, totally confused why there wasn't a single burn mark, so Vale explained the material was actually loaded with anti-magic. The dragon girl was positive this dress had insane defense, making it way better than any basic armor. Plotty demanded to know what Batemi did to him, but she was totally clueless and said she did nothing, making Belina wonder what was really happening while Plotty guessed the caterpillar had some secret. They ask Kid what he did with the caterpillar, and he tells them he's just taking super good care of it so he can make some awesome clothes for Plady. Vale agreed and explained that since Keaton totally changed the orcs and goblins, the same thing probably happened to this caterpillar too. The kid agreed, and while Vale was hyped thinking a new legendary armor was being born, Temmie shut it down and said it was actually just fashion. Everyone's begging Batemi to hurry up and make that armor, and even though she keeps yelling that it's not armor, Kidan is just stoked to have clothes that are actually tough. He realized the Demon King was basically wearing old futon cotton, so he figured they could just get Botemi to remake the whole outfit for him. Zidane figured it was just another wild surprise for the day, but then Aster looked right at him and totally caught his eye. She noticed his clothes were all ripped up and figured he just snagged them on something at work. He spotted a tiny rip on the side and was totally shocked that he'd actually put a hole in the shirt Kidan gave him. Astra offered to fix it but then got all shy, admitting she was still a total beginner, so the Demon Lord just thanked her and told her he'd leave it all in her hands. Everyone watched as Zayden stripped off his shirt so Astris could stitch up the hole, and Kidan figured it was totally fine if the Demon King kept it for a bit longer. Everything kicks off in the human kingdom, where a voice suddenly growls about hating the dragon. It's the king himself, and as he sips his drink, he realizes this beast has brought the entire war to a total standstill. The advisor reports that the generals have no idea why the dragon appeared, so they're telling the army to stay put, and the king is totally losing his mind because he thinks they're all being... He asks who the dragon's master is, calling him Saint Kidan, but the advisor says they've got absolutely zero info on the guy. The king takes a sip of his drink and calls everyone there totally useless, making his advisor apologize like crazy. The king just smashes his glass on the floor while his advisor watches. Then he demands another cup of fresh fish juice and the advisor is totally on it. The advisor can't believe the king is actually chugging that gross stuff, but the king just says the whole situation is a total mess. He lets out a heavy sigh, thinking they were so close to finally winning a war that's been going on for centuries. King Junxus XVIII had to end the war between humans and demons, so he used all his kingdom's magic to summon heroes from another world. The king thinks if they crush the demons, they can just steal their power for the kingdom, and right then, his advisor brings him a glass of fish juice. The king wants the dragon dealt with first, but he asks his advisor if a secret master actually exists, and the advisor admits that plenty of people are doubting it too. The advisor warns that one wrong move will just set him off, and if that dragon shows up again, it's game over for everyone. The king was just chilling and sipping his juice, not even caring about what his advisor was saying. Then, the thought of total destruction finally hit him. He snapped back to reality the second. The king slams his glass down so hard juice flies everywhere, and he demands his advisor find Sankadan right now because if they get him on their side, they're definitely going to win. The advisor admits he might be right but asks how they'll ever find him, so the king tells him to go put together a search party of the strongest heroes. The advisor mentions rumors of a civil war in the demon capital, but the king gets even more ticked off, says he doesn't care, and decides to send the whole army home for now. He orders every last resource in the country to be used for Saint Cadan. The advisor is totally on board and agrees with him instantly. The king swears he'll find Saint Cadan and... Meanwhile, in a totally different time and place, there's this house. It's built in that classic old-school Japanese style. Inside, someone is pouring a drink into a cup. The guy says it's been 2 whole months since they got here, and the girl thinks they've actually learned a ton. The guy takes a few sips of his drink and lets out a heavy sigh. He tells the girl they need to get the feel for the sword again. He pulls the blade out, looking totally hyped. Asteris asks the Demon King what's bothering him, and he tells her that the holy sword Ain't Loath is acting totally restless. The Demon King points out that the sword is reacting to someone, and after a long silence, Asteris finally remembers something important. A bit later, they head out to track down Holy Lord Caden, who suddenly shouts back that he's right there, and asks the Demon King what's actually bothering him. The Demon King stares down the Holy Lord and asks Keaton what that sword in his hands is all about. Keaton says this sword is a total beast that can slice through anything, and he just proved it by cutting straight through mana metal. Platy reveals that's the holy sword they snatched from her teacher's undead king dungeon, and she's fuming because it's being treated like total garbage. The Demon King was totally blindsided that the Holy Lord of Swindlers was actually packing the legendary devil sword Dreishvar's, and even though Norio tried to give it back to his teacher, the blade just refuses to leave his side. The Flesh Princess turns to Norio and credits him for saving her from the undead king. But he admits he only did it because he had no choice, and didn't even understand the crazy powers the gods gave him yet. The Demon King and the girl next to him are totally shocked by what Norio said, and the king explains that according to legend, a saint's holy power can actually turn into the power of a hero. Norio remembers the undead king's teacher saying something just like that, and now the Demon King is staring him down, thinking he's a hero summoned from another world. Norio thinks it over and admits the Demon King actually has a point, but the Demon King isn't buying it for a second. Norio gets all hyped up and finally admits what everyone already suspected. He's actually from another world. He explains that since he's got zero fighting skills, the Demon King literally kicked him out of the war, leaving the whole crew totally stunned. So Norio started wandering these lands all alone, staying far away from everyone, and the Demon King is honestly in total shock. The girl turns to Zero and asks if this was supposed to be a challenge, but Norio just says it's easy as he drops to his knees and grabs a handful of dirt. He squeezes his fist to show off his power, making a tiny flower sprout right out of a handful of dirt. The Demon King is totally shocked to see the bud sprout, but Norio explains it's a gift from the gods meant for a chill, peaceful life. The Demon King figured it all out and called her power a miracle that's useless in a fight, so Norio had to do something big to finally get stronger than the undead king. Out of nowhere, Norio realizes he can use his gift for way more than he thought, like unlocking the hidden potential of anything he touches. The Demon King and Astros are totally blown away by the max power of Dry Schwartz's Devil Ball. But Norio claims that being the strongest doesn't matter if it's just because of raw strength. The Demon King's voice actually starts to shake as he admits that literally nobody else in this world has power like Norio's. He's tripping over the insane power the human gods gave Norio, so the Demon King asks if he wants to prove he's way stronger than the humans, and finally go back to his kingdom. Nor flat out refuses, and even if it's a total insult to the Demon King who's at war with humanity, he doesn't care because he's not on anyone's. Norio claims he's a free man just so he can marry Princess Platy. Then shyly looks over at her husband while the Demon King turns to face the Holy Lord, Norio. He says the Light Lord is totally right, because if he wasn't around, things would get way more intense with the mermaids who are also fighting in this war. The Demon King looks at St. Code and Norio and tells him he's a massive deal for the world, then suggests they grab a drink to hope and their plan working out perfectly. St. Claude is totally shocked and hyped to see the Demon King, and after they shake hands, Norio confirms that everything the king said is the real deal. A little while later, the Demon King and Asteris head back to the Lord Saint, and the king brags about how they just punished everyone who was slacking off while they were. The Demon King decides to crush even more traitors to get the whole country on his side, and Norio is absolutely loving every second of it. Norio's blown away by how well they planned everything since he thought they were just on a honeymoon, while Vale asks the girls in the back why they never actually ride with the Demon King. The girls get all flustered by his concern and tell him that as long as they're here, the Demon King can just warp back whenever he wants. Vale suddenly transforms into a dragon and shouts that the Megaum are taking the girls to the demon realm, while Norio desperately tries to get him to chill out. The sea invites the Demon King over to restock his food, and a girl named Belina steps up to say her job is to link the king to this land. The Demon King and the Asterisks give Belina a huge thank you for all her help. Now the Demon King is totally interested in this other girl named Batemi. She says she's... Batema asks the Demon King if she can stay and keep making clothes, and honestly, Norio thinks that's a perfect plan. Batema walks up to Miss Astris looking super awkward and serious, but she's just standing there totally clueless. Suddenly she's rocking this stunning dress, but Emma drops a bombshell. She actually made it for Miss Astris, the only girl the Demon King ever truly loved. She felt so happy it actually made her a bit emotional. So she thanked Batemi before the Demon King told her it was time to move forward with Asterisk, and she was totally down for. A glowing magic circle suddenly spawns behind the Demon King and Asterisk as they wave goodbye, promising their friends they'll definitely meet again. The whole crew cheers them on, and soon a portal pops up for the Demon King and Asterisk to dive right in. The Demon King turns to Asterisk and admits that for the longest time, he never thought this war between demons and humans could actually end in peace. Astris is totally confused by the Demon King's words, But the king keeps going, explaining that seeing the Lord Saint made him realize his old dream wasn't just a fantasy. Astros walks right up to the Demon King, and when he asks for her power to make his dream come true, she says yes without even thinking twice. This chat happened way before the Demon King even went back to his kingdom. Noria walked up to a total stranger and challenged him to a fight. That stranger was actually the Demon King himself. The Demon King is dying to see what Saint Kitten can really do, but since Noria is total trash at handling the ball, they have to keep the plan super simple. An arena suddenly slams into the ground, and when Norio suggests a sumo match, the Demon King asks what that even is. So Norio explains it's just a game where two fighters stand face. He explains that both fighters have to stay inside the circle, and while the Demon King thinks it's a brawl until someone stops moving, Noria shuts that idea down fast. Noria steps right up and grabs the Demon King, telling him he should try holding his enemies just like this. Norio explains that the Demon King isn't allowed to land any hits, so he has to drag his opponent out of the circle since all strikes are totally banned. The king finally got the picture and said it looked easy, and after Norio agreed, the Demon King jumped into a fighting stance and challenged him to a duel. Norio said They face off from across the ring and the fight kicks off, instantly slamming into each other as Norio tries to shove the Demon King out, but the guy won't budge an inch. Norio suddenly remembers he's got some serious sumo skills, so he hits the Demon King with a pro move that catches him totally off guard and sends him crashing to the ground. The Demon King was totally lost, so Norio started apologizing and said he didn't expect things to go down like that. The Demon King tells the saint to stay out of the fight again, so she listens and calls for Okubo, but right then a voice screams for help. It's the Mermaid Prince, and he's looking at San Kadan like he's totally lost, while the Demon King is just as shocked to see him show up. The Mermaid Princess is totally weirded out that the Demon King is actually there, but Norio tells her to relax and pitches him a plan. The Demon King and the Mermaid Prince go head-to-head in a wild sumo match while Norio refs the whole thing, keeping them in the ring so the fight never stops. Out of nowhere, an ogre named Okubo shouts at Norio tells the district to bring in way more guys. A bunch of beast people start jumping into the ring to scrap. The guys at the office had a total blast with the brawl, and pretty soon, everyone was completely obsessed with sumo. After a ton of crazy battles, Prince Arwana finally took the win, and Norio was totally shocked that mermaids could actually stand that well on land. A little while later, a voice rings out in Norio's house saying the bread is finally done. A girl takes a big, crunchy bite. It's the princess, and The girls are obsessed with the bread, realizing that even though food is food everywhere, the taste and texture here are just totally different. The princess asks what this bread thing is, so Norio explains it's a total classic back in his world, and that you can use the flour to make all kinds of other food. Norio brags that he's got a new trick in his bag, but then Vale pops in and tells him to hurry up and make a whole bunch more for her. But first, the Lord Saint wants to prep one last thing. A real food from his world that he's planning to grow next. It's actually just rice, and while the girls are standing there totally clueless, Vale is already dying to know what it tastes like. The Lord Saint says these sweet white grains are like wheat but also totally different, which completely shocks the princess, especially when Norio mentions that rice is grown the same way as wheat. The Flesh Princess is totally stunned by what her husband just said, so she turns to him and says they need to change things up right now. The princess explains that the organ team is handling all the building right now, while every single orc is out there working the fields. After the demon race broke loose, a new recruit joined to handle the farming. Belina took charge of the roots. Everyone jumps in to help when things get busy, and they've even got a total dummy of a dragon on the squad. Vale explains she's the one stopping invasions, digging out the fields, and even moving whole buildings, while the princess nods along, saying everyone has their own important jobs to handle. The princess shows up and is totally fuming that they're wasting all that power just to harvest and grind wheat, and the girls are right there with her. The princess starts losing it, screaming that she's the only one actually making the medicine and fermenting the food, and everyone is just standing there in shock because they realize they totally messed up. The princess starts listing off her crazy workload, from making fertilizer for the crops to brewing meat and soy sauce, and even handling the yeast in the cold storage room. The princess stands up and says she can't handle all this work alone, making her husband drop to his knees and beg for her forgiveness. He starts tearing up because he totally underestimated how much work he took on, calling himself a trash husband, but the princess calms him down and says it's fine now that he's learned his lesson. The wolf claims he's only doing this for a good meal and tells the princess to just hang on, but she straight up tells Vale to shut up. Suddenly, a voice cuts right through the princess and Vale's talk, and it's the mermaid prince, brother-in-law. Noria starts begging for forgiveness and calls him He tells them he made a deal with the saint to sell pickled radishes, so he's finally here to buy them. The princess absolutely loses it when she finds out her brother-in-law is the one who ordered all those radishes, and now he's desperately trying to get her to chill out. The princess says the immortal king next door is obsessed with this radish. Then she asks the squad why they love fermented food so much, and the brother-in-law just says it's super tasty and good for you. They'll says the bread is fire, and the girls totally agree, hyped about how many types of fermented foods there are, though they admit that even as demons, they're actually pretty bad at medical magic. The princess totally loses her cool, yelling that her work is ruining people's lives, and her husband just breaks down crying and begs for her to forgive him. Suddenly, the princess gets a genius idea and tells her brother-in-law he showed up at the perfect time, because she just realized she can find people to handle her workload and experts who specialize in. The princess tells her brother to bring some mermaids over, and when her brother-in-law acts confused, she threatens to hike up the price of pickled radishes. The princessum looks at her husband, and he's totally down if they can actually pull it off, so the Holy Lord turns to his brother-in-law to see what he's thinking. The princess starts begging her brother for a taste of her husband's rice, and Norio is getting super flustered by how much she adores him. The brother-in-law thinks it over and says sending the sea people is going to be a huge pain, but Norio isn't backing down and asks him again. Sharina asks the Holy Lord if mermaids are just scared of the beach, and while Norio thought they hated him, the dress actually starts to vibe with it, so Sharina finally works up He calls the princess a total weirdo, and right then, the brother-in-law's sister stands up looking absolutely furious. She's totally confused why her brother-in-law is being so random, but he just tells her that for any normal mermaid, the surface world is a total nightmare. The girls totally got it since mermaids are basically fish, and since the brother-in-law says sea folk can survive on land just fine, Platy is a total one-of. Her brother-in-law says that thanks to the flesh medicine, he can move between land and sea whenever he wants, and Princess Platy is totally hyped to hear it. Back then it was all just a story with strict rules for humans, like losing your voice or straight up turning into bubbles and disappearing. Vela shows up and orders the mermaids to stay in the sea, but her brother-in-law snaps back that it's impossible since they need those goods to handle their business with other nations. His brother-in-law says those sea monsters won't even think about coming onto land unless some crazy strong medicine shows up. Sharanj explains that since medicine is getting better, they need a new system to kick out all the criminals, and his words leave everyone, including Umi, totally shocked. Shorn explains that if you aren't executed, you're kicked out, and without a cure, you're stuck surviving in the brutal wild forever. Everyone is totally losing it over the brother-in-law's words, especially when he says the shore is a living hell for sea dwellers, and that the princess is a much easier. To help with the physical stuff, you've got to be a master at brewing potions, but even with a royal command, staying out in the field for this long is just brutal. The princess totally backs her brother-in-law and suggests dumping the exiled criminals right here, leaving Shorin and the whole crew completely speechless. Surek starts losing it and screaming that they can't do this because the Mermaid Kingdom is deep in debt to the Holy Lord, so his land is off limits for a prison, but the Lore Flower just tells him it's no big deal. Norio's worried about the board getting wrecked, but Shorn says the Holy Lord isn't scared of anything, and it's actually the bad guys who should be running for their lives. Out of nowhere, Vale transforms into a dragon and yells that she's totally fed up and is gonna roast anyone who shows up, while Platy tells her brother that if he still wants those pickled radishes, he's gotta bring 3 assistants with him. The Princess of Flesh doesn't care if her assistants are criminals, because if they've got talent, she's hyped to have them on her team. The Princess of Flesh claims she's sending them all straight to heaven, while her husband starts apologizing for pushing her way too far. After a while, Sharon finally shows up with some backup. Standing right in front of Norio are 3 girls who are barely wearing anything. Vale is totally confused and asks if it's actually normal. He clears his throat and says sorry for bothering the saint, then introduces the girls again, calling the one on the right a pufferfish, the middle one an anglerfish, and the one... Norio is totally confused why his brother-in-law brought these girls over, but the guy warns him they're actually criminals and tells him to watch them like a hawk. Lord St. Norio thanks the girls for showing up, introduces himself as Keaton, and tells them he's super hyped to finally meet them. Pufferfish is making sure to record his thoughts on this guy. Angler thinks the landowner is a total joke and can't believe she's stuck working for him, and Gara Rufa. Out of nowhere, Princess Platy interrupts and tells the girls to get moving, leaving everyone completely shocked that she's actually there. Rafa the Ice Witch, Runpai the Fire Witch, and Gara Rufa the Epidemic Witch were all standing there, looking totally shocked to see the group. The brother-in-law declares that these girls are officially criminals now, and they're being sent to a prison camp run by his sister, Princess Platy. Ronpiece is totally tripping over her words, But then she just dives into Princess Lady's arms with a huge grin, while her brother-in-law Noriel stands there looking completely lost. Rampai instantly drops to one knee because it's been ages since she last saw Princess Plady, leaving her brother-in-law and Norio standing there in total shock. Rampai is in total shock that she's actually serving the princess again. Her eyes start filling up with tears. She tries so hard to keep it together. For her, this is basically... The girl calls out Rampai as the criminal. Her brother-in-law backs her up, and it turns out this whole trio is already famous for being total troublemakers back home. Rafa smirks and calls Rampai a total royal family clinger, but Rufa shuts her down by exposing that Rafa is actually obsessed with Prince Arawana, and that's the real reason she showed up. Rafa snaps and starts yelling that she's just showing her what life is like outside the water instead of rotting in a cage. But the other girl just hits back with a sarcastic comment, making N. Rufa is totally clueless about what to do next. Rampai swears he'll serve the princess forever. Pei is ready to fight until her body literally turns to dust. Rafa asks them again since she's totally down to help wipe out humanity, but Plotty shuts the plan down just to focus on their art. Noreo asks Sharon what crimes the three of them actually pulled off, and even though Sharon is super confused, she starts spilling the whole story. He explains that in the Mermaid Land, 6 mages used beast potions, and were known as the Crazy 6 Witches, but Sharon only brought 3 of them, leaving Norio and the girl. He kicks things off with Rafa's story, a girl who can sense mana flowing deep in the ocean, and even tried to invent a way to control it, thinking the whole thing was totally... Surin warns that if Rafa could control mana, she'd use every drop of water to wipe out both humans and demons, and Norio is totally freaked out by the idea. The brother-in-law explains that Rafa isn't just a dangerous radical, she's actually a total pro at what she does, which is exactly why they had to lock her away. He asks about the girl with the glasses, and his brother-in-law reveals she's actually a hardcore criminal named Gara Rufa, leaving Norio totally shook. Rufa was a total legend in the mermaid medical world, and Norio really looks up to her for being such a pro. Brother-in-law starts explaining Rufa's weird theory, but she suddenly cuts him off, complaining that nobody actually gets how cool her experiments are. Rufa gets super hyped explaining his theory that tiny invisible monsters are the ones making everyone sick. Her brother-in-law totally didn't get why Rufa was so hyped, but Norio realized those invisible creatures she was talking about were actually just microbes. Norio thought back and remembered that even Princess Plady was totally shocked when he explained how yeast and fermentation worked. Rufa starts screaming for everyone to listen up, explaining that the body can fight back once it remembers these tiny monsters, and Norio realizes she's talking about an immune reaction. Rufa keeps yapping about his wild theory that taking blood from a survivor and giving it to a sick person will help them fight the disease, and that's when Norio realizes he's literally talking about a blood transfusion. Sharon starts hyping things up, claiming that injecting blood into someone else is a total death sentence, but Rufa shows up and calls out his weird logic, which actually makes sense to Norio since Norio asks about the girl kneeling in front of the princess, but Brother-in-law warns him that she's just another huge headache they have to deal with. Sharon reveals that this girl was actually one of the king's elite guards, and Norio shows up out of nowhere asking why someone like her is stuck in a cage. The brother-in-law says the whole drama is about his sister being single, because now that demons and humans are flooding her with marriage offers, the mermaids are totally split on what to do. Sharon explains that a mermaid noble from the neutral side was totally against the marriage and went straight to Sharon's dad, the king, to protest the whole thing. His brother-in-law acted totally chill, saying there's zero risk if the engagement fails because they'll eventually just give up and walk away on their own. This noble guy totally runs his mouth, saying the princess only knows about medicine and will be a complete disaster as a wife no matter who she marries. Hearing all that trash talk made Rampai snap, so he absolutely wrecked that noble right then and there, leaving him a total mess. Suddenly, Rampai jumps out and scares Sharon half to death, making her scream that the whole mess wasn't even her fault. She says some snobby noble started it by insulting Platia, but her brother-in-law tells Norio that since Rampai won't admit she's guilty, they threw her in. The brother-in-law begs for forgiveness for bringing those creepy girls, but Plotty just tells him it's way too late to change anything now. Norio turns to Plady to check if she's alright, and she's totally blushing and hyped that he's actually worried about her, but her brother-in-law just... Plady gets totally heated and tells Sharon he never should have been her guardian, but Sharon shuts her down by telling Mr. Norio the real truth, that Plady is actually one. Norio starts getting really worried about her, but she doesn't even remember the crimes she committed, and her brother-in-law claims Plady is the most dangerous witch of them all since... After everything that happened, Plady got the nickname Crown Witch, and Norio finally realized his wife was actually a witch, which totally freaked him out and kept him up at night. Her brother-in-law leaves everything to Plotty since she's the only one who can handle one of the 6, and she tells him he can totally count on her. Plotty is stoked because her workload just got way smaller, but her brother-in-law, Norio, and the girl are just staring at her like she's totally lost it. Ranpai is totally hyped to serve the princess again, shouting "Pay!" and calling this place a literal paradise, while Rafa wonders what kind of world they've actually found. Norio says a guy named Kidden owns this place, and while Rafa and Rufa think this is a human hideout, they can't stop thinking about that girl they saw wearing a cloth that looked exactly like a demon. Next, a goblin and an ogre head over to tell Norio the pizza oven is officially finished, and he makes sure to thank Okubo and Gabunshin for doing such an awesome job. The witch girls show up and are totally losing it. They can't believe an ogre and a goblin are actually chatting with Mr. Norio. Now they're convinced they've... Suddenly, Vale cuts them off and tells the girls their opinions are totally worthless, since their only job is to stay quiet and help the mermaid cook even better food. The girls stare at Vale, totally confused why this tiny kid is acting like their bodyguard. Vale is not happy with what they just told her. Suddenly, she starts glowing so bright that the whole... Vale shifts into a massive dragon and brags that she's way taller than the girls, leaving the witch team shaking in their boots at her giant new form. They have no clue how the dragon from those 2 world disasters ended up here, and Garufa is so shocked he literally blacks out. Norio tells Vale to pipe down or she's getting 0 food, and she shuts up instantly, so Norio announces a massive pizza party to celebrate the 3 witches finally arriving. Vale has 0 clue what pizza even is, but Norio tells her she'll get the hype once she takes a bite. All while Rafa is just confused about who this dude even is. Plotty drops the bombshell that this guy is her husband, leaving Ranpai and Rafa totally frozen in shock until Ranpai literally passes out and hits the floor. Suddenly, Rafa hears a voice and whips around to see a skeleton in a robe and hat thanking them for the invite to the newcomer party. Rafa's voice is shaking as she identifies the Immortal King, totally freaked out that 2 world-level disasters are standing in the exact same spot. Rafa passes out and hits the floor right after, so Plotty tells everyone the party is on hold until these girls finally wake up. After a bit, she finally opens her eyes. She's lying in a really comfy bed. She suddenly bolts upright. Her friends are already there, just waiting for her. The whole room is dead. Ranpai is totally lost, but Rafa explains they're in a weirdly built house that smells amazing and has a super comfy bed. Ranpai realizes Prince Sarawana only brought them to the surface for hard labor, but right then, a maid named Belena suddenly bursts into the room. The girls are totally freaked out when they realize she's a demon, and while Belena mentions a deal from St. Coden and tells them where to go, it finally clicks for Ranpai, so she screams for Princess Platti and starts sprinting toward her like her life depends on it. She drops to her knees right in front of the princess, calling her totally miserable for being forced to marry a demon in this absolute hellhole. The princess is totally lost about this hell place they're mentioning, and insists the guy is her husband. But the mermaid girl isn't buying it, and asks her again while Ranpai. The other mermaids followed Ranpai and started grilling the princess about why a human was ruling demon land. But Belena shut them down by saying this isn't actually demon territory, explaining this place is going to be a total nightmare, and the princess knows it. When Rufa asks for the truth, the princess reveals that this land is actually its own independent territory. She tells them they're in the village of St. Codon, but the girls are totally confused and say there's no way that's true. They think calling it a... She asks who thinks this war is gonna end easily, scaring the life out of Ramp, while Ranpai realizes he knows her right before she introduces herself as the dragon Grinzel Vale. Just as she remembers seeing the Immortal King, the dude suddenly spawns right next to her. The mermaid girls are totally freaked out now that the Immortal King has suddenly appeared, and they're terrified he's about to send them all to the afterlife. Belinas admits she was totally shocked at first, but she confirms that the Immortal King and the Dragon Veils are actually the ones guarding this whole place. Ranpai is totally shocked, but he finally realizes this place is just as legit as any other country in the world. The princess tells the mermaid girls they can live here without being scared, but then Vale adds that they shouldn't just stay. They need to get to work too. Vale calls them pathetic fishtails and says they're only working to feed the mermaid, but the princess fires back that this isn't just for her sake. Rafa figures they're just here to be chefs, sending Ranpai into a crying fit as she tells the princess she's totally hit rock bottom. But the princess just asks her to say. The princess tells them she's showing them their new workplace before dinner, and asks Henbane to give her husband the heads up, which Henbane promises to do right away. Rafa is totally shocked they're actually cooking. Rufo is busy looking for clues, and Ranpai is already plotting a way to bust out of there with the princess. They finally make it to the spot, and when the princess swings the doors open to show them their new job, The mermaid girls are totally blown away by what they see. They caught a super weird scent that actually wasn't gross at all. And the princess explained that this is where she makes all her special spices and food ingredients. The mermaid girl spots some dark liquid, and the princess explains it's soy sauce before scooping a cup for them to taste. The girls are totally shocked by where this soy sauce actually comes from. And the princess even says it tastes just like the medicine they use to flavor their meals. The girls take turns dipping their fingers right into the soy sauce. They slowly bring them up to their lips. Then, they finally take a taste. They serve it up immediately, leaving everyone totally shocked. The girls are totally obsessed with the soy sauce because the mix is perfect and hits so many different flavors. And even the princess is like, yeah, this is the real deal. Rampai tells everyone the princess made this insane medicine, but she's totally confused and says she didn't do it. The princess says her husband told her the secret. This stuff is actually made by tiny little organisms and microbes. Rufa was instantly hooked by the princess's words. And even though she claims she's confused, you can already tell this is going to be something insane. The princess claims they were just doing the same kind of research, and Rufa backs her up. Rufa stares into her bowl of soy sauce, realizing those tiny creatures she imagined are actually living inside, and the princess tells her she's 100% right. Rufa bursts into happy tears because her research was totally right, and she's so hyped that this sauce is actually made by fermenting microbes. Rufa's so hyped she tries to chug the whole bottle of soy sauce, but the princess stops her before she accidentally sends herself to the next world. She tells him all about the time she tried to taste soy sauce, but her husband actually stepped in and stopped her. Rafa's a little salty that someone's already using her research, but she's also low-key hyped to learn more about these tiny microbes since the princess is totally betting on her. The girls are getting a major bad vibe from this holy guy who's definitely hiding something, and when the princess reveals her husband is actually a legendary hero, the mermaids are totally blown away. Rampai calls him out, saying Rafa is so obsessed with his research that he literally ignores everything else. She explains that these heroes are actually people dragged from another world to fight off demons and save the day. Rafa is totally shocked when Rampai says everyone else has their own shady business going on, but Ron just shrugs and says that humans being trash is old news. The princess reveals that the human king basically kidnapped her husband, then dumped him for being too weak to fight, so now he's surviving by using all the genius skills he brought from his old world. Suddenly a voice cuts them off. It's the Dragon Veil, and she's so starving she thinks you and Mister are both super mad at those girls. A bit later, the pizzas are finally done and ready to eat. 4 different pies are sitting right there on 4 trays. The mermaid girls are totally shocked to see food from another world, the Holy Lord. He slices up the pizza and hands it out to everyone, giving the first plate to the Dragon Veil, who is totally hyped. Rampai mentions that the princess's husband, Lord Sankadan, is a total mastermind, as the whole squad sits down to a massive feast and gets ready to dig in. The mermaid girls grabbed the pizza slices and started eating, and their minds were totally blown because they'd never tasted anything like it before. Rampai is losing it over how fire this food is, totally shocked that an isekai dish could taste this good, while Rufa says the flavor is so intense her soul is basically floating to heaven. The saint is super hyped that the girls are loving the meal. Rampai just stands there watching silently. Then the saint serves the teacher and brother-in-law their absolute favorite dishes. The princess suddenly remembers her big brother and tells him she's making a huge batch of pickled radishes soon. So she tells him not to be shy and to come buy some. And Rafa is completely losing it because Prince Arowana is showing up next week. And she can't believe a guy who's basically a ghost even to the merfolk is actually coming that soon. Rufa is totally loving the drama, telling Rafa she didn't say a word, while Norio asks his wife if they have any more, and she tells him they've got plenty. The princess is super hyped because her husband's cooking is seriously out of this world today. The saint asks her about the tomatoes, since he knows she's obsessed with them. They both start laughing. Rampai can't figure out what the princess sees in this dude, but she looks so happy he just lets it go. Once night hits, the mermaid girls head to their room to chill on a super comfy bed, and Rafa mentions that the food was seriously delicious. Rufus says those tiny creatures are the real MVPs, and Rampai admits that Kidan is actually a total beast at working. The girls start chatting about their day while relaxing on the bed Batumi made for them. It feels super smooth and nice to the touch. It's actually made of silk, which is... The girls keep wondering if this place is actually a total nightmare, or if it's basically heaven on earth. While outside the building, the night is pitch black without a single moon in sight. Rafa finally wraps up her work, but Rufa suddenly bursts in to interrupt her, asking for help with her own project while holding out a strange curved object. She wants to soak the dried radish in wheat miso, so Rafa asks her to repeat herself just to be sure. He gives a little laugh and points out that the miso is actually full of mold. So that's how you make pickled radishes, and Rafa is already daydreaming about the prince eating her cooking. But when Rufa teases her about it, she totally denies saying a word. Rafa asks where Ronpai disappeared to, and Rufa explains she's out hunting with orcs because she loves a good workout, and sure enough, we see her walking down a trail with 2 orcs. Ronpai spots something moving out of the corner of her eye. Suddenly, a wild boar leaps out on command. She stands her ground and gets ready to swing. The boar charges straight for her. The orcs are going wild with excitement. Rampai brags that as a royal knight this is easy work, but it's not long before she's completely defeated. Back in his room, she says they didn't just help her husband, they actually teamed up with the juices and goblins to finish that radish field in record time. The husband says the seedlings are ready to plant, and once they grow, they'll finally have rice from his homeworld. The Holy Lord says cooking rice is actually a huge deal to him, and when the princess looks at her husband for an explanation, he gives her nothing, leaving her to get lost in her own thoughts and start feeling totally hyped. She tells him they need to cook this rice super fast, and her husband is 100% on board. Finally, the rice field was totally ready for action. They had all the sprouts and special boxes lined up and good to go. But the mermaid girls were just standing there, completely clueless about what to do. They find out they're planting sprouts today, and when Rafa asks if rice needs to go straight into the water, the princess tells her she's totally right. Rafa begs him to stop so she doesn't ruin the outfit he made, but Batemi just thanks her and says those clothes were actually built for getting dirty in the fields. Since the saint is finally gone, Rufa's using this rice to brew some legendary sake, and she's positive it'll taste so good that Prince Arohana will be totally blown away. Rafa says this is the whole reason they're here and she's dying to try that rice, while Rufa is just pumped to be working with the person they just took down. Ronpai tells the princess she can't get her hands dirty and insists on doing all the work herself, because she'd literally go through fire and water for her. Vale is forced to get to work even though she's totally against it, and the princess asks her husband to show them all how to plant rice the right way. He tells them to grab 3 or 4 seedlings and pinch them right between their thumb and finger. He shows them exactly how to stick the seedlings into the water, and with everyone on board, the princess kicks off a massive rice planting tournament for the whole village. Everyone starts wading into the water one after another, but Rufa is low-key freaking out because the freezing cold is giving her major goosebumps, while Ronpai is actually stunned to see Rafa. The maid girls are backing up the team by bringing over a fresh batch of seedlings. One by one, the villagers start planting them all throughout the water. Even the mermaid girls and the Dragonvale squad are. The mermaid girls are totally over it because this job is way harder than they expected, with Rufus's legs giving out and Rampai's back absolutely killing her. The servant girls are totally losing it because this job is way tougher than working out in the fields. One girl just can't take it anymore and collapses face first right into the water. Even after, a saint rushes over to check if Batemi is okay, while Vale watches them and calls them total weaklings, right before the princess asks her if she's finally getting tired. Vale brags that she's a dragon with insane strength even as a human. But then she realizes the princess isn't even out of breath, who just says she's got powerful legs. They all challenge the princess to a race to see who's the fastest, and she just smirks, saying she's not about to lose to a girl who does nothing but eat and sleep. Both girls are totally locked in and ready to win, and the second the rice planting battle kicks off, she blazes ahead and starts planting at crazy speeds. Lord St. Kidden is totally lost and has no clue what's even happening. The mermaid girls are just staring in pure shock at the scene. These two handled that whole strip-in. Everyone is blown away by the insane skill on display, and right now, the princess is the first to land with the dragon lurking just behind her. The princess suddenly runs out of seedlings and calls for more, so Runpai grabs a bunch and sprints over to get them to her just in time. Out of nowhere, Vela shoves Ronpai and sends her stumbling. The other mermaid girls are completely shocked by what's going on. Now, Ronpai is way too far away from. The princess is stunned to see the field looking so trashed, but Rampai says she's doing okay, even though she's blown away that Vale still has crazy dragon strength in his human form. Rampai admits she totally underestimated the work and tells Princess Platy that her human legs are actually insane. Rampai claims hard work is the key to training, but the princess says she isn't doing this to get stronger, and then Vale pops up to reveal it's actually all for the sake of eating some amazing food. Vale and the princess are totally daydreaming about that rice, and while Rampai knows this is all just for a meal, the princess keeps everyone hyped by hiding the fact that they have to finish. With everyone pitching in, they finish the whole job in a single day, and the princess's magic made those plants shoot up in just a month. Finally, the rice was finished, and while the saint's best friends were totally shocked by how it looked, He just told them they could dig in whenever they wanted, day or night. Vale is dying to try the rice and begs her master for a bite, but the princess cuts in and says the husband has to be the first one to taste it. The maids say the princess worked her heart out to make that rice grow faster, and when the saint double-checks, they swear it's the truth. Word is the princess didn't just use fertilizer to make the rice grow super fast. She actually sat right behind the fields and asked for help to make sure they got a massive harvest. Lena just giggles, so the princess tells her to cut the story short, leaving Kidan totally blushing and shocked by his wife's move before she finally tells him to just try the rice. Kidan nods along with his wife and fills a cup with rice, taking a small bite to taste it while the girls behind him watch with total excitement. The saint picks up a tiny bit of rice and slowly takes a bite. The princess is dying to know what her husband thinks of it. He tells her it tastes absolutely amazing. The princess is totally stunned by her husband. Then Vale suddenly pops up and begs the saint for a taste because the food is so insanely good it's literally making her cry. Saint tells Vale to hang tight while he finishes the side dish so she can finally experience the full flavor. Ranpei says the princess worked so hard just to see him smile, and she's super glad she gave it her all, while Rafa totally gets how she feels. Rafa just fires back, saying she never even said anything like that. The princess asks her husband why this rice is so special to him, maybe because it's the national food of his home world. The husband agrees with her, but he's not done yet because he wants to thank everyone who had his back, especially his wife. Norio checks in on Hephaestus to see how she's doing, since she's the only reason he's even here living his best life. He says sorry for being late and hands her the rice balls with a huge thank you, telling her not to be shy and to finally taste what they worked so hard to make together. The princess looks at her husband and warns him that this food is actually super dangerous. At first, she thought it was totally bland and didn't get the hype. But once you eat the rice, the girls are totally on board with the princess, saying they can't go back to a life without this food, while Fail literally begs her master for another plate. The saint thinks the girls totally love the rice, but Rafa says it's actually terrifying, and now Vanity is hyped to start cooking all kinds of new dishes with it. Plotty and Vale are totally losing it because they had no clue more food was coming, and they never even realized that rice tastes way better when you pair it with other dishes. Out of nowhere, Vale jumps up and announces she's heading back to her dungeon to crank up the difficulty, leaving Saint totally stunned while the princess thinks it's a great move. Keaton's totally confused about the rice, but the princess explains that raising the dungeon floor is going to bring out a bunch of new monsters they've never seen before. Vale backs up the princess, saying this trick makes rice and all kinds of food taste way better, and Kitten is totally shocked you can even do that inside a dungeon. Rafa says only high-rank beasts like dragons are strong enough to actually change the dungeon. This place follows its own crazy rules, and since it's overflowing with mana, the princess claims only one of the two world disasters can actually change the dungeon, and while Vale backs her up, Kidan is still super suspicious of her. Rafa never thought so many miracles would happen all at once. She's totally blown away by how incredible this place is. Rufa remembers that Rafa was busy studying how mana flows and changes people. The princess wants to focus on getting the food ready, but Ron Pai is itching to test her strength in Lady Vale's new dungeon, even though the dragon tells her she's way too weak to handle it. Everyone was super curious, so she's throwing a bunch of tough levels at Ron to see if he can handle it. But the princess is already sensing some major trouble ahead. A few days pass and Vale's dungeon is finally upgraded, so she tells the whole squad to raid it together. But Saint is already getting annoyed by her voice echoing from the mountain peak. The princess says they're just there to study new monsters, but she's got a bad feeling the final bosses are already waiting as the squad gears up to enter the Vale dungeon. Ron Pai thinks the saint is tagging along, even though the king summoned him from another world and then kicked him out for being totally weak. She's not sure if the saint can survive this massive multi-level dungeon, but she's going to protect the princess with everything she's got. Out of nowhere, the squad spots something moving up ahead. A massive pack of wild boars suddenly charges right at them, but Ron Pai steps up and tells everyone she's taking them all on. The girl is totally stunned when the immortal king pops up right in front of her, and with one quick wave of his hand, he wipes out the entire herd in a flash. The immortal king thinks this quest is actually pretty hype, so he decides to join the squad just as Vale speaks up to him. She tells him to stop messing with her dungeon and bans him from changing a thing, right before a dragon's claw suddenly snatches the immortal king by his collar. Vale kicks the immortal king out for cheating, but the team is actually super grateful he saved them from a monster fight they never could have won alone. Ron Pai says being buddies with two world disasters is totally killing her pride as a royal knight, and the whole squad finally lets out a huge sigh of relief. She totally takes back what she said and claims she's only there to guard the princess, while the couple thinks about switching up the dungeon since they've only run into monsters they already know. Vale tells them to chill since they're just in the old zone, but she warns that it'll be a total disaster if these monsters disappear before they even reach the new zone waiting up ahead. After walking for a bit, they finally hit a clearing. The princess tells her husband to stay on high alert. They both realize they aren't alone anymore. Ranpai warns everyone that he can feel. Out of nowhere, something sneaks up behind Rampy, and before they can even blink, these spinning pucks leap out of the tall grass and attack. Ketten thinks these pucks look exactly like UFOs, and they're flying straight for them. They're spinning so fast they're basically giant blades, slicing the tops off trees like it's nothing, but the team manages to dodge just in time. Keaton screams that it's a UFO, but Ranpai tells him to back off because she's got this totally under control. The princess warns everyone not to sleep on her since she's got the power of a crowned witch, and Ranpai promises he'll do whatever it takes to back her up. Keaton was pretty nervous but still wanted to help, so he grabbed his sword and got into a fighting stance, only for Ranpai to point out he was holding it the wrong way. Ranpai grabs the bag and says they've got to stop the breakthrough first. Then she rips the clasp open with her teeth and tosses it way up into the air. The bag starts glowing whenever something flies near it, and then it just goes off in a massive explosion. The princess remembers the Ranpai used potions that blow up, and the saint finally sees why she's called the Witch of Hellfire. She's super hyped about her win until she goes dead silent, realizing those flying things don't have a single scratch on them while Vale brags about how tough they are. Vale warns that these turtle monsters have the toughest shells of any beast, but Ranpai steps up and says you can just flip them over to stop them cold. Out of nowhere, these weird ropes shoot out of the turtle's head, grabbing her hand and quickly wrapping around her whole body. The princess has no idea what these weird tentacle turtles even are. Gobukichi tries to break the girl free, but he just can't do it. The orc. He slams his axe into the turtle's shell, but it's so tough the blade just shatters, leaving Ranpai completely stunned. Gross tentacles start popping out of the turtles' heads and creeping toward the squad, so the princess tells her husband to handle it, and he's totally down. The turtle's tentacles slowly start wrapping right around the girl's neck. But then, the saint swings and delivers a massive hit to the tentacles. They go flying in every direction. Even the saint. The Holy Lord asks Ranpai if she's doing okay, and she says she's fine just as smoke starts puffing out of the turtle's head. The princess picks one up and realizes the squad is totally confused after wrecking those turtles. But those monsters she made were actually just the bottom of the barrel. The team is about to run into some seriously scary opponents next. Anna tells the Bauer. The orc explains how these skulls can be turned into gear for the others. Saint backs him up, and Vale tells the squad to quit stalling and get moving. The princess shows up and says they're just there to study new monsters. But even when Ranpai warns her that way stronger beasts are waiting ahead, she just brushes it off like it's no big deal. She claims her husband is way tougher than both world calamities and is the strongest guy alive, leaving Ranpai totally stunned. She's not buying a single word the princess says. There's just no way this girl's husband is actually the strongest guy in the world. She's not letting this bring her. The squad stops for a breather in the woods, and Ranpai is totally blown away that the Holy Lord is actually way stronger than both the Immortal King and the dragon. She still doesn't get why the kingdom would kick out the Holy Lord when he's got such insane power. The Holy Lord claims he's got 0 fighting skills, but a god gave him a gift that lets him max out the power of anything he touches. Plus, this lord is holding a sacred ball, and Ranpai is totally shocked by what the saint just said. Kidan claims that makes him nothing special, but Ranpai knows the saint. Princess Platy married a total hunk, and now the whole mermaid kingdom is safe even if demons or humans try to mess with her. The sun is blindingly bright, and the princess says that even though the view looks the same, it's actually getting way hotter. Out of nowhere, the dragon's voice cuts through the princess's thoughts, as Vale warns them that the next stage is a scorching hell, filled with monsters that love the heat. A pack of wolves with manes made of fire suddenly blocked their path, and the whole squad immediately got into their battle stances. Vale warns that these hyena lichens are the deadliest 4-legged beasts around because they're fast, brutal, and get even more powerful as they heat up. Vale brags that they've already won this game of endurance and there's no escape, asking Lord Saint how he'll even handle the wolves right as they pounce on him. The princess and Ranpai are just as curious, but they freeze in total shock when every single wolf suddenly starts rolling on the ground like a bunch of obedient puppies. They have no idea what's happening, but then the Immortal King says these hyena lichens can sense the Holy Lord's insane energy, and now they're just looking at him all sweet instead of trying to rip him apart. Lord Saint starts petting his troops like they're his own little puppies, acting all grumpy about it even though he's actually having a blast. The crew is still trekking through that absolute oven. Those wolves have been stalking them the entire time. They haven't even tried to slow down once. The Immortal King explains that since these wolf monsters follow a strict pack order, They've officially accepted the Lord Saint as their new leader. The wolves are just staring at Lord Saint sweetly, and even though he's totally confused, he smiles back and says he's shocked they like him this much without him even. Ron Pite realizes they've stumbled into a high-level dungeon, and while the princess is getting worried, Vale just wants a pat on the back while warning them that the monsters ahead are way scarier. With their wolf pack following close behind, the squad keeps pushing deeper into the Vale dungeon. They eventually stumble into a massive area that's totally buried in snow. The princess is super confused. Vale announces they've finally reached the end of her freezing hell dungeon, and just as the princess is begging to go home, the Lord Saint suddenly whips around. The whole squad follows his lead and freezes when they see a massive monster looming right behind them. This bear was absolutely massive, staring down the squad with pure rage, and even the Holy Lord was totally freaked out. The girls realize this is that same massive power they felt when they first arrived, and this beast is way taller than any of the ones they fought before. The princess begs her husband to get out of there, but the crumpled guy warns her that this monster is a total beast, and he doesn't want to wreck the whole place for no reason. The Lord realizes there's no running away and looks to his teacher for help. The immortal king speaks up, saying even this bear knows just how insane the Holy Lord's power really is. The immortal king says it's just the bear's destiny to take on the strongest, and with a massive roar, the beast charges right in. The bear charges straight for the saint, but suddenly a pack of wolves jumps out from behind the Lord and swarms it from every side to prove their loyalty. The saint says he's got no way to help and tells Rampai to handle it, so she draws her sword and charges in to stop that bear from attacking her team. She moves super fast and slices the bear's legs, making it roar in pain as it loses its balance and slams into the dirt. Ron Pie says his paw is totally wrecked and he's stuck there, so the saint thanks Mrs. Ron Pie while the crew tries to head home, but suddenly Vale's voice cuts their friend off. She tells them to stay put and refuses to let it all end this way, while the bear is totally knocked out and Holy screams for the whole team to stop right now. He asks his wife for the ointment he mentioned earlier, and Platy and Ranpire are completely shocked when they realize the saint is about to use it on the bear. Rampai warns that the bear will just vanish if they leave him alone, but if his enemies push their luck, he's gonna get seriously dangerous. The immortal king's voice wants to turn that bear into pure mana, but the veil tells him to stop doing whatever he wants, while the saint looks over at the teacher. Kadan's second-guessing himself, but he's gotta save this bear because he knows it's not there to fight. It's definitely on a mission. The princess is forced to hand the ointment over to the Holy Lord, and Kadan apologizes to Rampai for all the crazy effort she put into keeping them safe. Rampai thinks Lord Saint is way too soft to protect the kingdom or the princess, but he's finally getting ready to make his move. Keaton tells Mr. Bear to start looking after himself so he can live a long life, but the bear doesn't even blink at the Holy Lord's words. This totally set off the Dragon Veil. She couldn't believe the team actually ignored her rules. She says she's got nothing left to lose. Well, except for her final trump card. Suddenly, Velsama drops right onto the battlefield and announces she's their next opponent, leaving Rampai totally shook that the final boss is a literal dragon, while Vale absolutely loves seeing them freak out. She tells the squad to relax because this clown only has 1% of her power, but that's still enough to wipe out a few cities. She tells her team to charge in and start the fight. Suddenly, Lord Saint spots something moving fast out of the corner of his eye. It's a bear, and it slams the dragon. The girls are just standing there in total shock as the dragon starts fading away from that massive hit until it completely vanishes, and Kanayan is losing it because the bear actually destroyed the Veil clone. Keaton and the bear lock eyes for a second, leaving Sviato totally confused. Then the bear suddenly spins around and walks off toward the horizon until it's completely gone. The Orking Doblins claim a monster like me can't understand this bear, but they say he's a proud warrior fighting just to pay back their master's kindness. Okubo says the bear is off on his own journey to become a beast their master will finally respect, and the saint is sure they'll cross paths again. All she's done so far is fight like crazy to protect whoever she wants. She didn't actually save the world, but being kind enough to help anyone, even an enemy, is what real strength looks like. Fast forward to Holy Lord Kidan's village, where the Dragon Veils are looking pretty smug, while Rufa complains that her brand new dungeon was a total flop. The Holy Lord walks right up to the dragon and serves her a fresh meal, telling her it's a brand new dish called katsudon. On the way down the mountain, the saint finally found an egg-laying bird monster and cooked the meal he's been dying for, all because Vale's dungeon got a total makeover. Saint says he can finally level up his cooking and thanks Vale, making her totally melt as her eyes glow with joy and she blushes like crazy. Sviatoa calls everyone over to the table since the food is finally ready. After a bit, someone lets out a super weird shout. The whole group is totally blown away by how crazy. The saint explains that while they were raiding the dungeon, The squad finally snagged those eggs they've been hunting for, and once they head back out, she notices the town is getting... The saint is really curious about what's coming next. He has no clue if his village is actually going to survive. Meanwhile, something big is starting to happen deep in the forest. Two mysterious guys in hoods are whispering together, totally lost about what's going on and freaking out that a whole village is actually hidden here. A whole squad was perched up in the trees, and their leader Aileron says she's got to see the action herself since she's the boss of this thief gang. We've got Pochi, Pez, Khan, and Taro, and this Holy Lord guy just tosses a bandage and tells his wolves to go fetch. The Holy Lord explains that these are the wolf monsters from the Veil dungeon who moved in with him, and as he pets one, he's totally blown away by how beautiful it is. Lord Saint says Pochi and the crew are busy clearing out pests and kicking monsters out of the dungeon, but there's one big problem. The wolves are already throwing hands over a tiny mouse they caught. Sviatoa realizes the wolves are totally gonna run out of food. Suddenly, he gets a wild idea. A little while later, he's busy getting some meat ready. Veil walks over and... The saint says he's gonna cook up some dog food for his wolves, but Veil is super salty because those wolves are eating their food too. Veil's not laughing at all as she blasts fire from her mouth, ready to take those wolves down herself, but Saint stops her and says there's no need since they're already part of the family. Veil is still totally annoyed, so Saint pulls his sword and gets ready to shred these guys. The saint is obsessed with his crazy ball because it slices food into tiny microscopic bits. But Veil is low-key mad that her unholy great sword is being used so disrespectfully against him. She's totally done with Lord Saint and won't let him off the hook. She's so mad that she's actually gonna eat that weird dog creature. There was even a little... Lord Saint says he's looking out for his dog's health by trimming the fat and tossing in some veggies to keep the diet balanced. Lord Saint was still nervous about whether the dogs would actually eat the food, but they totally loved it, right before a mysterious voice suddenly caught him off guard. Veil actually turned into a massive dragon just to beg for some food, so Svartis gave in and told her to turn back into a human and hold out her hands. He pours out some dog food, and Veil's eyes light up as she looks at her hands full of kibble and immediately starts scarfing it down. She's being really picky with the dog food, saying it might be healthy but still tastes like gross animal chow, when suddenly her face completely flips. She cracks a creepy little smile and looks at the dogs, and even they're totally terrified of her. She tells the dogs they can eat as much as they want, and after that day, people are freaking out over this village because the crops are totally insane, and even the richest lords or most powerful demons have never seen anything like it. They realize someone is actually farming these fields, so one of the thugs grabs a fruit for a taste and tells his boss he's gotta try it, but the second he does, his cheeks go. These fruits taste absolutely insane, and even the boss is about to take a bite. But then she suddenly realizes something because she can't figure out what that mysterious smell is, and it honestly is reread Rule 1 and 2. 1 line in equals 1 line out. Preserve the sequence exactly. If the user provided line A. The crew bets some fancy nobles live here, so it totally makes sense that these fields are hidden in the middle of nowhere. The guy is totally lost, but the boss tells him there's probably some insane treasure hidden in this area. If they blow this huge chance, their rep as pro-thieves is totally toast. So the boss calls himself Thunder Freezers and promises they're gonna strip this mansion of every single treasure. Wait, the boss suddenly spots something. One of the Lord Saint's dogs is actually spying on them from the bushes, while back at the base, the servant girl is busy summoning huge magic circles in the sky. She was actually scoping out those waypoints, and there is definitely something weird going on with them. Belena says her whole job is keeping them in top shape for the Demon King and the Demon Queen, Misastris. She's complaining that this gig was a total waste since she only got to perform one single song. To make up for it, she went ahead and helped out every single person she could find. 3 mermaids have stepped in to help out in all the spots where they were short-handed. This totally cleared her schedule and took a huge weight off her shoulders. Lately the servants have actually... She squeezes her fist, realizing things are looking super bad, because if this keeps up, she's gonna lose her job and everything she's worked for. She decides to take action and asks Lord Saint for a job. So she hunts through the entire mansion until she finally tracks him down, only to find him busy making pottery. The servant cuts him off, totally lost on what the Holy Lord is doing, but the guy just says he's busy making a bowl out of clay. He says since their plates are literally made of mana metal, it's finally time to get some normal pottery, and the servants are totally shocked to realize they've been eating off super expensive. The saint says hand molding is taking way too long, so he starts spinning the pot to fix it, and that's when the servant finally realizes what's happening. Belena is super hyped to help the Light Lord, who loves her energy but warns her the work is going to be a total grind, though the servant insists she's still useful. Belena reveals she's got psychic powers too, and the second she pumps magic into a pebble, it starts moving. That's the only magic she can actually do with a single rock. She sticks the pebble onto a spinning machine and uses some clay to hold it tight. Finally, she closes her eyes and says He spreads his arms wide as the machine starts cranking, and the Holy Lord is actually loving what the henbane is doing. The machine picks up speed, spinning faster and faster until the clay on top, Lore of the Color, tells henbane to slow her roll, and even though she says sorry, she won't admit she's working hard when Lord Saint tries to hype her up. She's grinding as hard as she can, but she's still not on the same level as his girlfriend or the others, so she's always asking for help just so she doesn't get fired. Lord Flower tells her not to sweat it and thanks her for the help, but henbane points out the pot is basically a pancake now, and she's done all she can, so Lord Saint asks. She's super happy with what he said, but then they end up with a dented cup that Belina tries to smash until Lord Saint stops her, and Anna tells her not to be upset because the first pancake is always a little lumpy. He's positive they can still fix things, but henbane tells him to chill out with the hero act, right before a friend's voice interrupts them, and they rush toward the sound of wolves losing their minds. Lars finds a bunch of thieves tied up and asks Okubo for the scoop, who explains they caught some elven bandits raiding their farm. Elves are basically like demons but evolved totally differently, and even though Lord Saint thought they were allies, she says they actually stay away from both humans and demons. The servants heard that tons of Elysian bandit gangs were robbing everyone blind, making both humans and demons absolutely hate their guts. They've probably got a secret hideout that's totally impossible to break into. That's exactly why catching them is such a nightmare. Then the Saint shows up and says He looks at the thieves and says they must have been shocked to find the farm, and when the boss asks who they are, the Saint reveals he's Saint Kidden, and this is... Everyone's whispering because Kidden is clearly human, and they can't figure out why he's hanging with a demon, or that every single person in this village is actually a monster. The Lord realizes these thieves are totally clueless, so he asks the orc what they did, and the big guy reveals they just swiped some tomatoes from the farm. Suddenly, another girl's voice cuts the orc story short, and the princess and dragon storm in, totally fuming that their tomatoes were eaten. So Vale shifts into a dragon and says, Sveta realizes there's no stopping Vale anymore, and the princess warns that if they don't let them walk away scot-free, there's no telling when this nightmare. Vale tells the thieves they're getting executed to show everyone what happens when you mess with their home, leaving the whole gang shaking in pure terror. They start sobbing and begging for mercy, promising to quit their jobs right then and there. But then Belena's friend has a total lightbulb moment. She realizes she's seen this exact group. The rich jerks they hunted were totally crooked, filling their pockets with stolen tax money and bribes. Once their dirty secrets got out, Demon King Zedin stepped in and completely trashed their reputations. Vale tells the invaders that a quick execution is way too easy for them. She looks the thieves in the eye and tells them to get ready. The Lord of Color takes a second to think about. Lord Saint is ready to drop the hammer, staring down the elven bandits who swiped 8 tomatoes from the farm and telling them they're in huge trouble. So now they're all working for them, and even though Belina was totally locked into Lord Saint Keaton's story, her face suddenly changed because she was completely confused.